Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 99.5 of Zion's Finest, a Star Wars Shatterpoint podcast. I'm Matt Richards. I am joined by most of the brothers. We are sans Kenny today. I joke a little bit. This is actually episode 100. We'll decide how it actually gets named in post. But our grand plan was to do our 3 tier list episodes leading up to episode 100. We ended up having an off week, and Sam and Kenny recorded an episode 99. That was the Jin or so box spoiler analysis, I believe. And so now our numbering's all awkward. So we'll see where we end up. But today we are here to do our secondary tier list episode. Our primary episode ended up at about 3 hours long. I expect this to be pretty similar because there's a similar number of units. But we know you guys are a bunch of freaks who are excited about this and will tune in for all 3 hours. So we are here to chat secondaries. Let's just jump right in. Scott, do you want to lead us off? Tell us about Gideon Hask, the former terror of the metagame.
Sure, yeah. Gideon Hask, for those of you who are unfamiliar, so as Matt said, was a very strong piece of the metagame with Inferno Squadron, acting as kind of the linchpin of that squadron, in that he was giving every Galactic Empire unit around him, and within 5 of any Imperial scout, an additional strike when they attacked, which is honestly just one of the strongest abilities that any figure has had in the game. They have modified and nerfed that. His figure itself has been basically exactly the same in terms of what his health is, his attack, his expertise. All of that is just that now, instead of anything within 5 of Imperial Scout getting to add a hit, it is anything within 5 of him that is Galactic Empire can change a failure to a hit. Still a perfectly reasonable, good ability, but an incredibly severe downgrade from what it was previously.
To know, it's just supports within 5.
Oh, it's just supports. Thank you, Sam. So Roar has had an incredible downgrade. It's an even worse downgrade. It sucks. I hate it. I hope it burns in hell. No, I'm just bitter because I ran a lot of Inferno Squad, and I agreed that it needed to be nerfed. It was a really powerful squad, but I am sad that it is fallen off. So really, Gideon Hask, to me, very strong secondary still in terms of his stat block, what he is doing. The problem is that Inferno has sort of fallen off generally. So rather than being kind of the top tier of what they're doing, they have fallen off just into sort of kind of the middle of the pack, maybe a little bit above average for Empire. He has sort of gone from being an auto-include to a really solid. He is going to get pushes very frequently. He's got pushes on 2 pushes on 2. He's got good expertise. He's pretty decent in both melee and range, although his range is going to be better. He's going to be rolling 9 dice. Really decent defensive expertise. So really solid secondary. I would very comfortably put him in A tier, probably towards the bottom half. However, I do think that there is an argument for the top of B in a meta consideration. I sort of leave him those areas just because there is still some testing to be done to see where Iden and him kind of fit in the Empire. I think ISFs have dropped off really hard, and so the Inferno Squad just also is kind of in a weird limbo. Could end up working really well paired with some other stuff, but kind of jury's out on that one for me still.
Yeah, thank you. Sam, what do you think?
I like bottom of A here. I think, as Scott said, top of B is also reasonable. But we did just see, I think, 3 Empire lists all running Hask take top 3 at Gen Con. There's some results there. He's still doing good things. I think towards the bottom of A is a perfectly reasonable spot to put him.
Yeah, that's where I have him. I have him right in that range between the two. Honestly, I probably would have had him B, but this weekend at Gen Con, seeing how many people had him run in, he still checks every single box in terms of a single figure doing single figure things. He just no longer creates the excessive amounts of pressure that he should. He still has his revenge trigger. Like, everything still ticks on him. I think I had him at the top of B, but he kind of fits in there. And also, I think there's a spoiler alert, a lot of those B tier units, and so I think having him in A makes more sense from a granular perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the joke used to be that like Gideon Hask was the like 3rd Empire primary that the Iden list got to run because his innate genuinely was like better than most primary identities in the game. And now it's just kind of like a really solid middle of the road secondary ability. And the rest of his kits still fire. So yeah, I suspect he's being underplayed a little bit, especially on the more casual side, because he just got nerfed and because everybody was sick of him. But he's still showing up at tournaments. He's still doing work. So yeah, I like him in A. Okay, Sam, you want to let's talk about K2SO, one of our newer figures in the game.
Yeah, K2SO is a super interesting figure with his lockdown and his revenge ability and how well he synergizes with Cassian and Jin in particular. I think he's kind of niche. I think he's kind of locked into being with one of those two. But I think what he does in those lists is uniquely powerful. And the power level in that is high, but the application is narrow. I still think it's above like a C tier power level. So I put him in B as like a B tier figure. He does interesting things. His tree has shove, which is good. Good defenses. His own activations are not splashy. It's what he's doing in combination with the rest of your team that really makes him shine. And we're really looking at this in the context of the whole. Individually, I might even like pull him down, but when he's in your team, he's doing good things because you're building around.
JK, what do you think?
Yeah, I had him right in this area as well. I think he's a singular annoyance, but yeah, he is 5 cost. So he already has a ding on him, but he fits a very narrow niche in terms of you don't just splash him. And I think the inability to splash things around is kind of what throws things into the B tier for me as we get going a little bit more and more. Things can be great, but if they're only great in a singular list, unless that singular list is the best thing out there, which Cassian can be discussed as there, but you can replace him with a number of things and Cassian's still great. And so I think that top third of B tier is probably where I would see him end up, but he's great. I think he has a specific point, and there's a lot of competition vying for those 5 points.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's tough to talk about K2 without talking about Lobot as well, who is another 5-point secondary that also has the lockdown ability in the same era, and so they tend to fill some similar roles. They're different in other ways too, but I think Lobot's the more splashable piece. I could see K2 being a little bit higher if Lobot wasn't an option, but yeah, I like him in B tier. Scott, any thoughts on this?
I mean, I'm a little higher on him than I think you guys are. It's still in B. I just think I would never put him in C. I mean, I don't think Lobot's really even a consideration because of K2SO. I get that his lower point cost makes him more flexible, but I also think that K2SO in the context of Cassian and Jin, which I don't ever knock points off for being niche because so much of this game is about, hey, this thing only applies to XYZ, but it's really powerful, so what does it matter? Like, Kiadi Mundi, the figure we rated as the highest rated primary in the game, only applies to Jedi, and he only gets paired with one of 2 other primaries. So what, right? If it's good, it's good. And I think K2SO presents, I'll put it this way. K2SO doesn't need to have really strong activations because he presents a defensive puzzle to your opponent that is one of the most singularly frustrating things I've ever played against. It doesn't matter what I do here. I can't take that point. I could body that point. It's a worse version of the tiebreaker. It doesn't matter if I bought him. I have to wound him, which means he'll get a retaliatory effect on me, right? And then Cassian is going to get to move somebody, so I may not take the point anyway. And then depending on what other stuff is there, other effects might happen. Oh, I wounded something else, so he's going to come up and attack me, prevent me from taking a different point, do some damage on me. The amount of defensive shenanigans that he enables, that he puts out, puts him very solidly B tier for me. I have no qualms about it.
Yeah, no, I agree though. Go ahead, JK.
I was going to say the primary versus secondary differences between the niche factor is interesting to me that I'm going to probably chew on the rest of this episode. But I think secondaries lose a little bit. Ironically, we're going to hit a point where we talk about some S tier figures that are incredibly niche for a specific reason and probably blows my argument out of water. But I think as a whole, I do view secondary flexibility as a little bit of a bonus. But I also don't see a reason why you should completely knock it off either. So I'm on board with Scott there too.
Yeah, I think top of B is perfectly, like top end of B is perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll fill out B tier a little bit more as we get there. I'm also realizing now that one of the introductory things I was going to say, I forgot to say. I'm going to put this in now. We're still in the first 15 minutes. I think that counts. So we are recording this at a time in which we have spoilers for the Jyn Erso box, for the Rift Tamsin box, and for the Delta Squad box. We have done some amount of testing. We're not ranking them in this particular list because they're not released yet, and we don't feel like we have enough reps to be able to speak confidently to where they hit. We're not going to shy away from discussing them as part of the context for other units necessarily based on our current perception, but we're not going to rank them here. I'm sure you'll hear plenty more from us about those particular units in the near future. With that late disclaimer, JK, let's pop over to you. Let's talk about Aura Singh.
Aura Singh is a fascinating figure who got one of the biggest buffs in the game. She went from being arguably the worst secondary, if not the worst secondary in the game, having a lot of interesting things in her kit. I struggled with where to put Aura Singh. When she is played, when she's on the board, she does cool things, but she does not elevate your lists. She does not make your lists better, but her activations are always incredible. She is able to be in any and every list, which again, I kind of give flexibility to, but I struggle to find where she actually goes. I don't know where she actually goes. As a pure numbers figure, I think she is really as good as anything, but she just does not add any sort of thing else to it. And I had her very low B, and I think that's where she goes. I'm also fine having her high C because again, there's a reason she's not getting played in any sort of lists. And it's just because she does nothing to elevate things. And that is being said from someone who I really want Aura Singh to work. And I think she has so many cool things and her kit's fun, but I can't think of the list, even the bounty list where she is a home, like that's her home with CAD. I would just rather other stuff in there nowadays. And maybe if she got her era expansion opened up, something along those lines. But I have her as a C. I'm going to put her in a high C and open it up to the court to change my mind.
It's really interesting. I like her in B, maybe the kind of lower half of B. I agree with you a lot, JK. I think her stats are good. I think she does a lot of cool things, but I think she's in an awkward spot for a couple of reasons. She's a 5-point secondary. The faction where she has a natural home in, there's a lot of competition, both for secondaries in general and also a 5-point secondary, because IG-88 is still kicking around there. I think there's a lot of interesting things there for sure. If this was a tier list in terms of, hey, let's rank these units based on how many weird brew shenanigans are possible, Aura would be top of S tier, and I think that's really interesting. But I don't think that we have found a home for her yet. I would not be surprised if sometime over the next year somebody finds a home where she just really sings.
I see what he did there. She artist sings. I think you guys are smoking crack. Not a ton of crack, just a little bit of crack. But I mean, honestly, I wanted to ask this question to yourself. If you don't know where you would play a figure, how can you possibly put her in B tier? How can you put her in C tier? I think C tier is generous based off of certain criteria we had. Like, I'm fine putting her in C tier entirely on the basis that she has really great stats, she has really great expertise, she has great attacks, she will bring value to any list she is in. But in me, C tier, which is as a reminder for kind of how at least I'm approaching this, and we've talked about, C tier is, hey, this has some very niche applications and can work, but it really doesn't work in a lot of places. I think calling a 5-cost secondary something that is splashable everywhere is also kind of a misnomer, because it's like it's 5 costs. It only really works if you've got a really good three cost support or a 9-cost primary. And I think, well, it makes sense to put her with Cad Bane. Okay, I guess you could put her with Cassian. I have no idea why you would put her with either of those when IG-88 exists. And with Cassian, I'm going to take base and share it. I don't know why I would ever bring Aura Singh. And so based off that, she might deserve to be in D tier. But I think her stats put her in C tier just because her stats are really excellent. And as Matt put it, I am not skeptical, as he isn't, that she could very well find a place with some new releases or some clever stuff. I just don't know where that is now, so I could not, in good conscience, put her in B tier.
I'm with Scott here on current meta application. I think her baseline is too high to be in D tier, but I don't think that she has home enough. And I think this is kind of what JK was getting at too. So I'm really in sync with, you guys just kind of at different ends of C tier. I just kind of have her in C tier generally, where she has room to grow. This is a character that may have something come that she could work really well with, but a lot of tag synergies are really locked kind of double tag issue, and she's only bringing one additional tag, which keeps her from the strongest synergies. There could be something down the line. She has the kit and the base is now there to make the future exciting for Aura, but it's not currently there. So I think C's a fine place to have her. And where exactly in C tier, I'm not exactly sure. We'll see as it kind of fills out, but that's where I am with her.
Yeah, I'm persuaded by that. I think C tier makes sense. I think her stats are good. She's not an active mistake to bring, but I think that she just doesn't have a home right now. And for me, it makes sense to put her in C tier. JK,
And
to you.
Comparing her to further D tiers that we're going to get to, I think you cannot, in good conscience, look at her compared to the D tiers that we're going to run into and say that they are the same figure. If Aura drops on the table, which may or may not happen, you still have to go, that's going to be an active, cool thing, and she's going to do great stuff, where a lot of D tiers, you just kind of laugh and move on.
Okay. Well, C tier for Aura then. Let's move on and let's talk about another unit that got a pretty big glow up recently, and that's Clone Commander Cody. I think he was probably competing for I think he actually beat Aura out in terms of being the worst secondary previously in the game. He's much better now. He has some mobility to do stuff for sure. He can actually do what he wants to do now, which is great. He's a great sniper. He has mobility. You can actually leverage his ability to kind of pump up your support attacks, which is great. I think that there are still some issues. Any kind of range restriction for offensive abilities can be tough because it can limit your reach in terms of where you want to try to get to. I also think that Cody and I think the 212 actually share this a little bit as well, in that they really struggle for action economy because they really, really want to be spending an action on a focus, which means that they are going to be highly dependent on paying force, or Cody's case, using his tactic in order to move around, or supporting fire dash, or some of those factors. And that means that they're kind of awkward in terms of where they have a home. Defensive maneuver makes you think you want them with Kenobi, but Kenobi, you often want to spend an action on a hunker also, and you can't spend an action on a focus and then spend an action on a hunker. I think Cody can really do a lot of work if you are building around optimizing for him. You're building a list to make him shine. He can be fine, but it's far from the best thing to do in Republic right now. And so I think Cody's great. I think he's in a pretty similar spot as Aura, where he's quite good on paper, but the meta viability, he doesn't really have a great compelling spot. I would put him in C tier above Aura. JK, what do you think?
I have him a little bit more in B tier, but the argument is the same. He is the 5th or 6th best secondary in Galactic Republic right now, which is more about the glut of great things that Galactic Republic has over Cody's lacking. But also, I think he has a defined place, which probably puts him into the very low end of B tier for me. But I also don't hate going into C just because his name is Cody, and out of just pure alliteration. Scott?
Commando Cody C-Tier. So I'm going to refrain from really expressing any kind of opinion here on the basis that I have not played with New Cody. I have not played against New Cody, but I will point out one thing to hopefully kind of remind you. What list does he go in, and where would you run him currently? And if you can't answer that question, then you can't possibly put him in B tier.
So I would say, like, if you're doing a build around with Cody with stuff we have right now, that would be some kind of pairing with Hunter where you're going heavy in kind of range attack aggro. So you're running Cody plus 212 with Kit, or 8 cost primary of your choice, pairing with Hunter and other good clone stuff. I think that list is fine. I think you can win games with it, but like I said, as somebody who is playing like full Republic Premier, it's pretty low down on my list of things that I want to bring to an event.
So I think that's exactly the list he goes in, the Kit Hunter list. That was going to be my same answer to your question, Scott. But I think that list is a dark horse C tier list. And so I think that's where he goes. That list is C tier. He's a C tier part of it. The last thing I want to say about him is that the math of his attacks and the math the rerules brings is probably better than you think. When you look at it and how it affects the clone attacks, and then if you stack Hunter stuff on top of it, it comes out that the clones are pushing a lot of steps on their tree. However, it's one of those things that almost seems to be a little less than the sum of its parts when you get on the table.
I think there's some possibility that with Delta Squad coming up, that there's maybe going to be an oops all clones, hunter killer style list. I worry about the Force Econ and just, again, competition for other things that you'd rather do in Republic. But again, it's possible for me that Cody shoots up. He's got the stats. It is purely like the meta is compressing him because he's just not as good as doing Jedi things in Republic. he's not as good as doing other things that you could do. All right, Scott, let's talk about Firebrand.
Oh, buddy, Firebrand. Firebrand's D tier. D tier. Maybe the worst secondary in the game currently. I'm open to other options. Actually, they're going to be the second or third worst secondary in the game. I can tell you right now. No spoilers. But Firebrand, I really like in the sense of I like the idea of Firebrand, a melee punisher, someone, flamethrower. So you're doing some cool, like, condition stuff that you can throw out. The problem is ultimately their expertise is okay. Their defensive expertise sucks as much as any clone or stormtrooper does. They don't have 3 pushes on their tree that all happen on the third, fourth, and fifth step, and they are never going to get to them in almost any scenario. They have a tactic that lets them move one of your characters, your supporting characters, which is nice. And they've got, hey, I'm going to blow up an objective kind of point, which is nice. But their ability that should make them actually a really strong contender in the game is a complete nothing burger because it's super easy to play around and it just needs a different wording change. So I'm referring to can't stand the heat, which is a reactive ability. So when the unit is not wounded, when one or more characters in an enemy unit ends a move action engaged with one or more characters in this unit, they may use that ability. They gain a disarm and strain. Have fun, Anakin. I'm going to disarm you and strain you. Right? Anything that is doing a melee attack. What's that? A move action is a very specific thing, and if they hunker, dash, jump, anything that is not explicitly a move action, it just doesn't apply. You could just get around it really easily. Cool. She's pointless. Never run her. She's one of the reasons that CT is so low because she's basically the secondary he can bring. She just needs a rework.
Yeah, Sam, what do you think?
Amen to that. Nothing really to add. She's really bad.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's I think the call out on the wording change is spot on, Scott. I think the arrow lock is really tough on her too. You're piling bad on bad. I think there's no disagreement. D tier.
Just make it so that if anything ends engaged with her, they take those things. That's all you do. Just say, if you end engaged with this unit, here's the thing. She can camp on a point.
Flip it. Let her go engaged with someone. If she ends a move action engaged with someone, they get that. Hey, oh, that's an interesting figure now.
Yeah, you could just have it worded, say, like, if a unit becomes engaged with her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that
swing for the fences.
Okay, that's a spicy meatball. I'd love to see that. That'd jump her up a couple steps. Just I give out disarms and strain for free. Oh, you got 3 units right there? She's just gonna hop on over.
Yeah.
That'd be glorious.
All right, Sam, let's talk Django.
Django. He was the beneficiary of a nerf. So not really a beneficiary. The poor sucker who got a nerf. It was needed just for not necessarily power level reasons, but the old not so fast was just an awful play experience on the receiving end, right? So he got that nerf. He also kind of ate an incidental nerf on his force refresh, so he only gets 1 back instead of 2. And he's in a faction that is pretty bad right now. However, with all that, my heart really wants to still put him in B tier, but it's hard with the state of separatists to actually put him there. And his problem in the bounty hunter lists is that it's the era thing. There's not a good 5. I think he would work in the bounty hunter lists if you could take him with CAD, and then there was a good 5 cost support to put underneath them. So his lack of a home kind of makes me want to put him towards the top of C tier. My heart wants to put him in B tier, but I think the realistic option is top of C.
JK, any thoughts?
Man, I am torn. I'm in the same boat. I think raw stats, he's a B tier unit, but yes, separatists are just hot garbage. But everything still tracks for him. His expertise is still good. His defense is great. His damage output is phenomenal. His stats and I feel like I have to put him in B almost because of all of the things that track. But again, going back to Scott's point of where does he get played right now? And the answer is no. And so he probably just slides back down and he sits at the top of C with all the separatists and we cry a little.
I think he has to go in the exact same spot that Grievous and Dooku does because he absolutely is a B tier figure. Everything on this thing. His not so fast. Yeah, I got nerfed. It's still a really great ability. Activate from reserve. It's a dash and make a 5-die attack. Cool. That's still a really cool ability. He's still got capture wire. He still's got his jump focus. He's still got jetpack. He's still got the force refresh and the heal. His defense is good. His melee attack sucks, but his ranged attack's pretty good. He's not going to wound a ton of people, but really solid. But meta consideration-wise, I agree. I think it needs to be in C tier because separatists are a C tier faction, maybe worse. And I hope they get better. I hope they get good again. And let's hope some releases bump them up. I want there to be love for the separatist players who are crying right now because the Republic was crying for a long time and they got some love, so it's only fair.
Yeah. I would actually make the case that I still think Django is like A tier, verging on S tier kit quality that just doesn't have a home. He doesn't have shoves until step 4, and you don't care. He capture wire is one of the best active abilities in the game. I think the change to not so fast is a big deal. There's a lot in his kit that's really good, but he's a 4-cost secondary that has a lot of great abilities. It gives you force refresh, which is super rare in a secondary. But the arrow lock combined with all of these other factors, he just doesn't have a list that can play him right now. And I think that's that. So I'm fine with him in C tier. Do we think he goes in the top of C tier right now above Cody, or do we think he goes to the bottom
Yes.
like his separatist compatriots in our primary episode?
I think Django should be at the top of C tier. I think there's enough of it should be B tier that I think he needs to be top of C.
Yeah, that's where I am.
I think he's the
Okay.
litmus between C and B, frankly.
Okay, sounds good. All right, JK, let's talk about Savage Opress.
Speaking of C tier figures, Savage, he has a place. It's with a terrible faction and with a terrible map rotation and with a terrible, I don't know. He is a very, I might put him in D. He's a low C tier figure. He does what he does well, but he has less than no home because you're not running Mama, you're not running any sort of Dathos. I'm going to talk myself immediately into putting him into the highest of D tier, and someone can talk me back into C.
I mean, I think he's D
It
tier.
entirely depends on how what's her name from the Ahsoka TV show and her weird zombies end up playing out. It's entirely
Even then, I don't know. I used to be kind of a defender where it's like, hey, he's an okay potato that can stand on a point and is hard to kill. He's hard to remove. 10 health, steadfast protection is not something that you can just pretend doesn't exist. But he also doesn't have shoves or enough damage to wound on his attacks. He's pretty slow, and the synergies that he's built around, there's just not enough density of good stuff to make him playable. I like him in D tier.
So the reason I think he is the edge between C and D tier, and I put him in C tier because Savage is the one of these figures that you will see show up to a competitive event and get not great results, but you'll occasionally see a Savage do okay in a weird niche list that goes 3-1 at like the top end. When I look at what can I do with Savage, there's enough interesting stuff there, enough reason to bring him that, okay, I'm going to try and do some interesting things with Savage and Mama T, or Savage with the weird separatist place. He has enough niche in there. And unlike the D tier figures for me, those are just figures that never see play ever for good reason because they're clearly understated. And Savage is understated, but you put a single shove on step 2 and Savage spikes up to be like, and I know we're not talking about like theoreticals, but that probably makes Savage like an A tier unit, right? And I think that all the other Ds need a lot more than that to be good.
I mean, to be fair, Sam, like I agree that having a push would be very helpful. And to be fair, I mean, on 4 steps with an expertise, you can do 9 damage, which will wound most things with 2 damage or more, and basically all supports. The problem is he is purported to be a primary hunter. So the thing is that I don't think a single push is going to elevate him from C or D to A. I think the problem is that his synergy abilities at the bottom of his card proc off of Separatists and Dathomirians. If they proc off for just any primary, I could see that being an argument. And if Dark Fury was not stupidly overcosted at 2 force, I could see that being a fantastic ability. I can just do some extra damage to make up for the lack of damage on his tree, even though he's supposed to be a primary killer. And if they're a force user, I can expose them. Hello, General Kenobi. Hello, Anakin. Hello, Ki-Adi-Mundi. Hello, Mace. I'd love to see him there. I think if you drop that to 1, you gave him a push, and you made Unwitting Brute just primary unit, you make those 2 changes, I'd put him in A, just as a counterpiece to the Republic right now. But 1 push is not going to make a huge difference on this guy where his synergy exists in a faction that doesn't have.
I'm going back to Sam's idea of I do think he's probably where Django might be the top end of C. He's probably the low end of C, where I think D tier figures, I think we know what D tier figures are. and they are like you never ever want to see, never want to run them. And Savage, I think, is slightly above that.
I
But
think the litmus we should use is there any scenario for fun or otherwise, other than just for a meme, where you would run this figure? If you were like, hey, I'm going to try out something interesting, I think this could work. It's kind of niche, but I'd never run Firebrand. I'd never try her. It's an obvious disadvantage. If you can say there is a scenario I think I could make Sauvage work in certain cases, then I think C is deserved. We've kind of set that as the C is the niche area, and D is the do not take, leave at home, break glass in case of emergency kind of piece.
Okay, so that makes sense. It seems like he's bottom of C tier right now, below Aura. I could see us quibbling down the road, maybe bumping him down to D, depending on how the rest of C tier shapes up, but I'm fine with him in bottom of C tier right now. All right, let's talk about Wrecker and Omega. I think this is really interesting because I was just talking about how like 10 health plus steadfast protection is not something you can just ignore. Wrecker showcases that really, really well. Wrecker, I think, used to be I used to rate him really highly, but like Hunter has fallen off since then. I think Galactic Republic tags are great, Clone Trooper tags are great, but I think that there's so much competition for great Republic secondaries right now that he's in a bit of a tough spot. I mean, not tough spot, but he has a lot of competition. I still think he's very good. I still think he's very playable. There are a lot of reasons that you might want to bring him. I put him in B tier, probably below K2. I think he's the best of the Bad Batch in terms of how they're performing and what options are available to play him right now. But he's still a great unit. It's just there's other great stuff that he's competing with that has pushed him down. I think he's like an A tier unit that is down to B tier for meta considerations for me. Scott, what do you think?
Yeah. I think you're spot on, Matt. I think for me, when I play against Bad Batch, Wrecker is the person I worry about. Yeah, Hunter's going to do some shenanigans, but Wrecker is going to give a guaranteed push if he's up against my people. He has the ability to do 2 attacks. Right? It's going to cost a lot of force. I can't usually afford it. It's very rare, but it happens. If I see Wrecker and I don't have diceless displacement, I just go, well, that's not a point I'm taking. That's his point. I can't do anything about that. I think that depending on how Delta Squad pans out, Wrecker absolutely could jump back up to being an A tier figure. I think B is very appropriate for him here. I would be happy to put him. I think he is fine right there next to K2SO. I don't think I'd put a lot of people between them. I think K2SO, again, represents a bigger problem, but Wrecker actually probably has more utility. So, 100% agreement.
I think he checks all the boxes. He has dice. He has a form of diceless. He has defensive shenanigans. He has a decent enough amount of offense. I actually have him above K2, but they are all within the same 2-3 spots. That this isn't a quibble. Going back to Scott's point of when I see him, I have to remember where he is, and often I have to remember all of the things he does to try and tick through my brain. I think he's a very solid B, and he's always going to be a choice. He's always going to be a thing where you're going to have to say, is there a place for Wrecker in this list?
Sam, any additional thoughts? Are you good there?
No, I think you guys covered him well. I think he's in a
Okay.
good spot.
B tier below K2. Scott, tell us about Dengar.
Yeah, so Dengar's really interesting. So he doesn't see a ton of play, but in the list that he does see play in, very strong. I'm thinking of Daimyo Matt's LVO list running with Mando and Charming Princess Leia. And then obviously we've talked about Cad Cassian on the podcast before. Sam has his version. JK's version that I like to follow is the Dengar version. My contribution was the Boba version, and I think the Dengar version is probably the one that is kind of middle, kind of all comers list, and I think Dengar is a really strong piece there. He gives a lot of utility. His activations are not necessarily going to be super huge and explosive. He's got an 8-die melee attack where if you've got IG 88, you can make that an 11-die. So he is going to roll really consistently on melee attacks. He's not going to take multiple points for you, but his payday ability allows him to be really flexible with a lot of primaries where they can, the Daimyo Matt list where had Mando and Charming Princess Leia can move him. Luke, the secondary Luke, can move him if you pay for it. And he's giving you a force discount for reserving any bounty hunters. So he can kind of help especially in a bounty hunter list where if you need some flexibility with that, he can get a reserve for free to kind of save you a lot of that force. The biggest things that he has as well is strong defense with steadfast and immunity to pin. So much of this game right now is about pinning your opponent and preventing them, because how much of the game do we see crazy amounts of out-of-action movement, right? Anakin's moving everybody, Cam's moving someone, Rex is moving somebody. So many people are moving people, even Revenge Triggers with Cassian. So pinning them is a big deal. Well, if you can't pin him, I think there's maybe like 2 figures in the entire game with immunity to pin, and he's one of them. So for me, he is a super solid B tier. You're not going to see him in a ton of places, but he is not a liability on your list. He's not going to be a superstar, but he's going to be just a good backbone. I think where you've got him at, he's going to be below Wrecker and K2 for me, but really solidly B tier.
Sam, what do you think?
I really like Dengar, actually. I think he is really, really strong. It's an interesting position. On the B tier spectrum, I have him closer to A than C for sure. And when thinking about this, I flirted with him in A tier a little bit, but I think that the problem is that he doesn't really have the individual impact of some of the other A tier units. So I'm fine with this. I would probably put him above the other 2 units, but I think it's close enough that I'm okay with this ranking.
I actually had him in A tier in my list. I went through a gut shot of like throwing things, and now I'm looking back and trying to figure out where they actually should be. Dengar's issue is obviously he's only with bounties, which are very good right now. His lack of out of activation movement for other people inside that whole bounty list is probably what keeps him from being an A tier figure. There's going to be so many of these high-end B-tier figures that we are really there's small quibbles here and there. I don't hate where he is. I wouldn't hate putting him above K2. I think he probably sits where he is, and we are fine with it, and we can discuss further down the road. But he is the most supporty of all the bounties, and he does it incredibly well. And an A minus B plus, and it just depends on if you're grading that on an 87 or an 86, where that line is.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I like him where he is, right below Wrecker. And I think let's move on. Sam, tell us about Agent Callus.
So I think Agent Callus is an A tier. He synergizes really well with some of the strongest primaries in the game, being both Cassian and Kanan. He has really, really good play with Jin, who isn't out yet, but there's some really interesting things you can do there. And he does well with some primaries who aren't doing as well in the meta right now, like Hera, right? His reroll ability really is the crux of this all. When you're giving out those rerolls, and especially when you're giving out 2+, man, that's a hyper efficient ability. And he does really well into steadfast units because of his expertise shove in melee. I've had plenty of activations where it's like, I just don't care about steadfast because I have shove that gets around steadfast in my expertise. And if you really need a second shove, he has shoves on 1 and 2. So you can get 2 shoves on a steadfast unit by just getting 2 steps down your tree. So he has some really interesting play into steadfast metas with Mace and some of these other difficult to deal with figures that we've talked about with Wrecker and Dengar. He really helps with the math. He is a feature, I think, in some of the strongest lists of the game. I think he's better than Hask currently. I think he has more meta application. Though maybe Gen Con maybe changes that a little bit, but that's where I had him is above Hask in the A tier.
JK, thoughts?
Not many. That's where I have him. I probably have the least amount of experience with him than anyone else here. But what Sam said, everything about it tracks. He is flexible enough to fit into a lot of lists. He is a high level support who does not have a bottomed out attack activation, and I placed him right at the top of my A tier list.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I agree. It's mostly off the back of his reroll ability. There are very, very few abilities in the game that allow you to meaningfully make a choice about whether to spend force, after dice are rolled, and you get to make that as a heavily informed decision rather than having to kind of know the math odds up front. And the fact that it applies to attack or defense and it's like 2 to 3 rerolls is just bonkers. 100% A tier. Scott, any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I might quibble a little bit. I don't disagree with the A tier classification. The only thing I would say is that I would point out that Callus does represent a little bit of liability. In the list that he goes in, I don't think there's a really better slot than him. If I think about someone to pair, if I'm doing a Kanan list, I really want just Ezra and Callus. You could run Sabine, but Sabine is going to be less impactful most of the time. The only thing I would say is if you're going to be running Callus, you need to be judicious with Force, because if that reroll flops and you just spent a Force on it, it is not a Force heavy list. The lists that he goes in are not Force heavy, and if you are compromising your Force and it doesn't pan out, and to be fair, that's just luck, and it's like it is what it is. But I have seen people lose games because they were not judicious about that reroll and really deciding if it was an absolute necessity. Because yes, it is a very efficient ability for wow, one Force for rerolling 3 dice. That's way better than Mace's spend 3 Force to add 3 dice. Why would I ever do that? But unless it's to win the game, and the math is really with me. But that's just a liability that I think he could maybe go below Gideon Hask, but I don't think I have nearly enough data to make that. I'm fine sticking him above Gideon until we learn more.
Okay, top of A tier for now. JK, let's talk about Grief Karga.
Grief, I think he has a lot of small issues. I think he has a place in the world, but the fact that, again, we are very high on that CAD casting list, which just does not use him. And so if you do not use him there, then you use him maybe under in a Mando idea. But I just think everything has a better slot for him. He's the 5th best bounty hunter enabler, bounty hunter thing in a spot where you're at best using 4 bounty hunters. And I do not think he is a D tier unit. I think if you can put him on the table with bounty hunters, he can do cool things, and he's interesting enough. I have him in the mid to low C tier, and his upsides are decent, but he has a bad activation, and his value as things get spread out gets lower and lower through the game, which I don't have a ton. I haven't run him over and over and over, and so there is very well that I'm missing a little bit. But I think he's pretty clear middle C tier kind of figure.
So I will trust your judgment on this but also maybe this is an argument against it. Grief was pretty bad before the patch. Bounty hunters on the whole are much better, which is where his synergy packages are, and I have not seen him played once since the patch. I have not seen anyone put him on the table. To me, that's his D tier, but I am happy to put him in C tier if I'm outvoted there.
I don't trust your judgment. Get that sucker in D tier. Dude sucks. His kit seems really cool on paper. Oh, I can mark someone to wound them to get an extra struggle tracker. That's cool. Oh, he breaks ties. He's got the ability to, when someone reserves and they're in activating them, I can move forward. It's just okay. So here's all of these really conditional things that may or may not happen. And what you get in exchange is 2 of the worst offensive expertise trees I've ever seen and a horrible defensive expertise tree. He's got 1 push on the second step, and that's about it. This guy sucks. I would never run him in Bounty Hunters. It would take so much. I would have to have the most incredible support to make up for what he's bringing. Again, fun, cool abilities that are really long and complicated. After this, you do this, this, and this, and then if this thing gets wounded by a bounty hunter, and blah 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 blah, you do this. It's just I don't know why you'd ever run him.
So
I don't know.
I think of him as Stormtrooper Sergeant for all intents and purposes. He 1 breaks ties, and 2 has you move every bounty hunter within 4, and moving every bounty hunter. So if he goes first, he dashes every single bounty hunter around her. Yes, he's incredibly thing, and I'm not actually going to fight the D tier ranking because, again, he at best is the 5th best secondary bounty hunter in a list where there's only 4 bounty hunters. But I think that there are slightly more support reasons for a 3 cost to push him up there. But I also agree with the general thoughts of Scott's and don't hate the pushback. Sam has also probably run him more than me, so let's kick it over to him really quick.
I want to point out really quick the Stormtrooper Sergeant comparison. His doesn't cost Force, and Grief's does.
He really tried to make Grief work. Part of it because I love the character. The character is so cool in Mando, and I wanted to make him work. And I was running him to, at best, middling success. And he's the D tier line for me. Like, it kind of breaks one of the rules of D tier for me in that he's the one D tier unit I'd run for fun, right? That, like, I think that his kit is so cool and thematic that I take it to, like, a local store event and be you know what, I enjoy this and I can brew something cool around it. But competitively, I really tried to make him work. I don't think bottom of C is crazy, but also I think he's that line for me. I think he's just under Savage, but it's basically CD. You are compelling to some regard, JK. I wouldn't have been upset if he ended up bottom of C tier, but I think where he is fine.
Sorry, Carl Weathers, you're D tier. Hopefully you get some love in the future.
I guess we didn't have a stew going.
That's correct. That is correct. All right. Well, talking about the exact opposite end of the spectrum, Shock T, if you had told me a year ago that there was going to be a 5 cost, yeah, JK is absolutely correct, slamming that in S tier. But if you had told me a year ago that there was going to be a 5 cost Republic secondary with 8 health that was melee only, that was going to be ranked S tier, I would not have believed you. Just straight up would not have believed you. But Shock T is top of S tier for me for sure. She almost never has a dead activation. She has displacement. She has out of activation movement. She moves incredibly fast because she gets a jump from her tactic. She can then make a move action, and then she has a reposition on step 2, which she almost always is going to hit. And so she is just such a huge playmaker. Often her activation is she goes, she flies across the board, and just flips a point. Almost every time she goes, she's going to flip a point, and she often has the potential to flip 2 or sometimes even 3, depending on how things go. She gives you force. She's incredible. She's S tier. Is anyone going to disagree with me on this? Scott, go for it.
No notes. I just wanted to add something, which is she never sees play outside cam. She totally could see play outside cam. I don't know why we don't really see it. Maybe it's just it's the best option, but
Yeah, it's because Cam's the
definitely see
best primary in the game. So like she also has direct, perfect synergy with Cam. But you can play her with Kenobi without Cam, and she's great. You can drop her into literally any Republic list, and she will do exactly the same stuff.
I just wanted people to not feel like, oh, she's not flexible. They only run her with Cam. Yeah, we do, but she could be flexible. She's so good and gives +1 force to whatever you're doing. Hell, I'd run Cassian and her just to be like, cool. Now I have 3 force. I don't know if you should, but you could.
She's that figure.
Cassian, but
Yeah, I can't run her with Cassian. Jeez, Scott. I also would break rules if I could. She is that figure that breaks the flexibility thing. Again, I think she could go wherever she wanted and be perfectly fine. It's so funny how she is the ultimate sum of her parts. Because, yeah, again, there's so many things that you go, oh yeah, 8 health, bad. Melee only, bad. Rolls only 7 dice, doesn't have any focus or anything along those lines. 5 defense dice is fine. But every single thing is so good on her kit. Just everything tracks. And does she have some weaknesses? Sure. But they're very minimal, and at worst, they're very, very small weaknesses of it's a game, and she's going to come to natural randomness.
Sam, any additional thoughts there?
No, she's great. Oh, don't forget her condition immunities too. Like immune, exposed, disarm. Just means her attacks are never dead, and her defense is always active. It's just some nice baseline consistency, but nothing really else to add.
Yeah. I think the last thing that I'll say about her is she is, she by far is the biggest playmaker in Republic, and that is a faction right now that has a lot of great playmakers. And she is outclassing a lot of primaries. I guess maybe Anakin is a bigger playmaker in some cases, but Anakin is a little bit more constrained in what he can do sometimes, whereas Shock T, you have to really invest a lot into displacing and pinning her in order to make her not be able to just come over and flip a point. Yeah, S tier. Scott, let's talk about OB2.
OB2 is interesting. OB2. So OB2 was one of the best secondaries in the game, in my opinion, and I don't think I'm going to disagree because I was right, where Mind Trick was a singularly horrifically annoying ability to just, hey, you just can't attack. Sorry, just gonna completely ruin your activation. And he got a nerf, which people talked about nerfing that ability for a long time, and they did nerf it, and they have changed it to now disarming an attack prior to the attack happening, right? Which is obviously not as good as just completely removing the attack. However, it still can be a quite impactful thing, particularly against people with really impactful attacks, like Anakin. So it can be good tech there. I really struggled with this because I had a very strong opinion of where OB2 landed, and then a bunch of people flooded and said, OB2 is so fantastic. He's so good as a counter against the Jedi, turning them off. And And I'm like, okay, like sure. He lacks so many tags. He's a Force user and a Jedi, so he lacks a lot of tag synergy. He doesn't have an amazing attack. It's really you're just kind of living and dying by mind trick and run. So for me, I place him in B tier, probably somewhere. Um, I'm not really sure between K2, Wrecker, and Dengar where he kind of fits in there. I think that he certainly has value in play. I couldn't reasonably put him in A tier in that, well, I believe people when they say disarms a really strong ability or, using the mind trick is a really strong ability. I just think, okay, but I am paying an opportunity cost by putting him in a lot of lists, and I don't know where I'd prefer him in some of the lists that I'm playing. So that's kind of how I feel. I'm super flexible if you guys are like, no, he should be elsewhere, but that's kind of where my feelings live on it at the moment.
Sam, what do you
So,
think?
Scott, I'm 100% with you. I was really low on him. And then I've been persuaded by some others. And I honestly, he could be higher. I just don't have the reps to really have explored all that. He could also be lower where I originally thought he was. I think B is, for me, that's the only where I can safely place him right now because I've played with him a couple times since the update, and he's felt fine. But no, that's not true. He's never felt fine. He's always felt great or awful. And so he's very polarizing, and that can be game to game. And so I need to play him more. I think B tier is fair. I also have a hard time placing him, like you said, Scott. I really don't know where to put him. He's the biggest question mark in this entire secondary tier list.
JK, any thoughts?
I was gonna go. I looked at the list of games played, and he has he's 70% win percentage right now, which is absurdly high. But 8 games. People who play the game aren't taking him. We're not taking him. He has a bottom 5 attack in secondaries. It's just awfully bad. But also, like, I groupthink. Yeah, he has out of activation movement, which is used. I'll leave him in B and be satisfied. I had him in the C-ish area, but that was honestly a lot of, again, gut reaction of how often am I going to look at playing him.
I had a similar thing where I was very low on him initially. My opinion of him has come up. I think if I had my way, I would probably put him in C tier between Aura and Savage right now, pretty close to the bottom. I do think Mind Trick, the new Mind Trick, is his best ability. I spent a decent amount of time theory crafting pretty hard on how do I use OB2 in order to try to shut down Anakin, because he seems like tailor-made for that. Which, just as an aside, AMG 10 out of 10 theme win that Anakin's attacks when he's disarmed are terrible, because literally every time in a movie that Anakin has lost a fight, it's because he was literally disarmed. But he has some issues. Like, his attack is really not great. I think that Obi-Wan is the biggest loser of Vader 1's change, where he just doesn't get the Vader 1 dice anymore, because his context previously was you slap him under Vader 1 and his attacks do things. And now he really struggles to do anything other than stand there and disarm people, which is cool. It's a thematic thing, and I can see how that's valuable. But I feel like if there was ever going to be a peak moment for his relevance in the meta, it would be at a time where Anakin is the most relevant, and that's right now. And we're not seeing him as a super high impact choice into that. The other thing that really depresses him down for me is that his name is Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I think that with General Kenobi being a metaforce, you are making a big... It's a reverse of where we were a year and a half ago. You are making a big sacrifice playing Obi-2 because it means you don't have the option to play Obi-Wan.
100%. I was going to say the same thing, Matt.
So I'm fine with leaving him in bottom of B tier, but I would probably pull him lower down past Jango, Cody, Ara if it were me.
The only thing that would leave him there is that I can envision putting him in a list before I put Django in a list. That's the only kind of thing.
All right, let's leave him in B tier. He'll chill Dengar for now, and then we'll see where we land. Okay, Sam, let's talk about Kalani.
Kalani's a C tier. He is the worst of the current separatist secondaries. You're bringing him for the dice ad. That's the only reason you're bringing him. His tactic, I think, is just worse than Kraken's. As crazy as to say, I think the flexibility of Kraken's is better. His defense is awful. 4 and 3, what were they thinking? He's kind of a relic of an old design philosophy that didn't get touched, and he's in a faction that's playing poorly, but he still does something good and unique he moves a bunch of people, he gives them 5 dice attacks, he brings extra dice. He's definitely not a D tier figure. So C tier right there between R and Savage, I think is perfect.
JK, any thoughts?
No, I completely, unfortunately agree. If one day droids are better, he probably slides back up into a meat.
Yeah, I think that the range requirement on his mobility is a little bit awkward, especially now that we have the new droids that we have want to be in melee, and Kalani distinctly doesn't. So I think Kalani could use a glow up on that front. But yeah, I agree 100%. Scott, anything to add?
No notes.
Okay. C tier between Aura and Savage. JK, let's talk about Gar Saxon.
Gar Saxon is a fascinating little figure because I think he has a spot. I think you can make discussions of placing him somewhere inside of a Mando list where you're running Armorer and Maul. The problem is it's not really happening for a reason, and the reason is it just doesn't tick. You know, the best Mandalorian lists are taking Bo into the new era, and him being era tagged is bad. His stats are still great. His abilities are still great. His stuff is still great. He has just fallen down. I would argue that he's probably just touching Django one way or the other. I think he's just below him, probably. Everything about him I want to like more, but there's just a reason he's not getting played.
So I'm not sure that he is not getting played. When I look at the armor lists that are doing well, it's Armorer Maul with Gar. Like, I think that is still the best build of the list. For that reason, I have him in B tier.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think if we were to spin the meta a little bit more towards an aggro-focused thing, then I think you end up with the Mando list or even doing a premiere that has flex options. But I don't think the Mandos in general are, I think they're like very solidly B tier, and I think Gar is a reasonable workhorse in that list. I think he's great at also being a unit in the core set that teaches you like the fundamentals of how to play Shatterpoint. I think he's a perfect design for that. But I think competitively speaking, yeah, I think he is not exciting or noteworthy, but he's a reasonable workhorse. B tier for me.
I also have a giant B tier, so having him at the bottom of the B tier makes sense as well. He was genuinely one of the tougher ones to rank for me.
I would like him to be above OB2, but I don't know if you guys are with me on that.
Fine with that.
Opinion on the matter?
Okay.
I trust you guys when you talk about Gar Saxon. I think that the real question is, like, would you take Gar Saxon or Bo-Katan in a scenario? And think, that's the question. So I don't know that Mandos are a super strong list right now. I think they are maybe a C tier list or a low B tier list for me, depending on the iteration, at least at Oops All Mandos. I think splashing certain Mandos can be really powerful, but I'm fine with low B above OB. I don't mind.
When in doubt, put Mandos in B. I think it's probably the rule of thumb that we have basically had since the start of this game.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's talk about Barriss. My general opinions about Barriss have been such a roller coaster. I was a big hater when she first came out, and then my opinion of her shot up. And now I think it's fairly middling. I think she has a lot to offer in some ways. Force push is great. Her attack tree with tons of shoves is great. She can do some cool stuff in terms of shoving one person to Kingdom Come and then force pushing the other to two swing a point. She's also pretty fast, but she is force expensive, she is fragile, and her identity that gives you bonus dice for Jedi primaries is cool, but it's pretty niche. You have to really build around it and be thinking about it. I think Barriss is a totally reasonable figure whose lunch is being eaten by Shaak Ti, who just does everything she wants to do but better, which makes sense because Shaak Ti is a Jedi Master and costs 5. I do think there are places for Barriss. I think the most obvious place is you run her under Vader 1 in a Republic list because that gives you displacement and is a place you can't run Shaak Ti unless it's in your other squad. And Barriss really thrives with the Vader dice. But I think Republic is really competitive with great secondary options right now. I struggle as to whether she goes. I kind of have her like low B tier, high C tier. I think she's good. I just think that she's outcompeted by other stuff in the meta.
I think you need to put her in C only for the fact that you've kind of listed she really wants to be with one specific primary, and I think the problem with that primary in that scenario is that you can't take Anakin if you take that primary, and so for me that feels pretty niche, and that defines C tier to me.
I will say I think there is the other list where she thrives in or potentially thrives in, which is the Mundi Plo full displacement list that's trying to hard tack against Kenobi.
You used the word Plo and you lost me.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it in the primary episode. Like, I think it's something we have underexplored, mostly because in our local meta, there are people playing Kenobi, but it's not nearly as dense as it is in other places. But that's a totally reasonable option, to play that. But like, I think C tier is totally fine. I would probably put her at the top of C tier if she's going in C tier. But Sam, JK, do you have any additional thoughts?
I would probably put her under Django, but I think she's
I'll take
I'm putting her under Django because I said Django is the baseline, so I'm not moving him. This is just pure stubbornness.
That's fine. I mean, that's also been her history. In the early days of the game, it was very much like, oh, why would you ever play Barriss when Django's right there? And you could just play Django in Republic and he would be better. So that's fair. All right, Scott, let's talk about Snowtrooper Lieutenant.
So remember how at the beginning of this, when I was doing Firebrand, I said, "Oh, she's the worst secondary in the game." I changed that because I was reminded that the Snowtrooper Lieutenant exists. I try to remember them. They're awful. They're so bad. So I think Stormtrooper Sergeant, which we'll talk about later, I think has some play now because he was previously, it was tough, right, to take him. But like, here's the thing about the Snowtrooper Lieutenant, who is sort of his, brother sister. It's four costs, and they're worse. They're just worse. They have just abysmal defense, right? Expertise. They have horrible tree. They have horrible expertise. I mean, the ranged expertise is okay. It's okay if you're getting 1 to 2 expertise. Their melee is 1 to 2 gives you a damage, and 3 gives you a hit and a damage. They have sharpshooter 1, but my big critique is that if a unit has sharpshooter and not a mechanism to focus outside of taking a focus action, you are rarely going to use it, and so it might as well just not be there. He has all of these things around like, ooh, I can take damage to get rid of conditions, or someone can remove a condition and then move if they're a sporting unit. Dude, everything's going to be dead before you're removing any conditions. This is a pointless ability. And then he has a dogged assault. When another allied soldier within 4 makes a combat action, he can use his ability. After they've been resolved, the attack unit may immediately make a take cover action. Whoop-de-doo. Good for you. It's just it doesn't see play. It's bad. It doesn't do anything. When I compare it to some of the other secondaries in Empire, why would I ever take this? It's so bland. So bleh.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement. JK, Sam, any thoughts?
I just want to say that that's fire and ice is really bad in this game.
That's
More like yellow Snowtrooper Lieutenant.
Yeah.
I do think it's pretty funny that the one example of an Empire overwhelming assault going well we have from the movies is represented by the snowtroopers, who are just very lackluster in Shatterpoint. So yeah, I think bottom of D tier makes sense. Even worse than Firebrand, which is saying something. Sam, let's talk about Nadar Veb.
Nadar Veb is an interesting case. I think he is a C tier unit in that he has some weird places. I know Titus has been a big fan of him on the Coordinated Fire podcast with his Ahsoka list that he plays with him. I've heard about people being excited to play him in Separatists over Kalani or Ara as an aquatic thing, which I think that shows the state of Kalani and Ara, but also kind of shows you where Nadar is like there's a question between the three of them, which you play in Separatists, and he has like weird niche plays in this Ahsoka list, and I've played some stuff with him, and he's not Snowtrooper Lieutenant bad, but he's not good. So you stick him in C tier near the bottom-ish by Ara and Kalani and call it a day here, I think.
Yeah, JK, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think you could quibble if you wanted to throw him in to slide him down a little. I don't. He has things. He can swing and he can hit hard and he can do things, and which brings him out of D tier. I ran him once or twice and I went okay and kind of moved on, but I didn't end going, boy, that was awful. So he checks a lot of weird boxes of he can move things, he can swing really hard, he has a decent tree, he has great expertise, and I don't want to think too hard about this one. It feels like he's a C tier figure.
Yeah, I've played him a couple of times, and the first time I put him on the table, I have this really vivid memory of charming Princess Leia just sort of sliding across the board and taking a range 5 shot at him from deployment and pinning him, and then he just was worthless for the rest of the game. I think he has some cool ideas, but he's supposed to be an anti-melee tech figure. We are in a metagame that is pretty high in melee impact, and he's not really doing much, and he is just so vulnerable to just getting like shot at range from forever away that, yeah, I think he's C tier. Again, he is pretty low on the list of like a very competitive grouping for Republic secondaries. and he is the other 5-cost secondary in Republic, and when the first one is Shock T, you're just really reaching to find room to play him.
Yeah, I don't know why you would ever play him. If he cost 4, I'd put him in B tier. I think his anti melee tech is, again, it's like Firebrand. Because of the wording, it's super easy to play against. You just not opt into it, or you opt into it in a way that doesn't cause an issue, and then it's like, cool. Turns out I can just move my supports up to you, and you'll get your ability, or I just shoot you from range. So I mean, I honestly would put him at the top of D tier just because he's 5 cost, so it's even harder to justify him. I would rather take Grief than him, but if everyone says C, I'm not going to quibble.
I think the thing keeping him out of D tier for me is that there are good players out there like Titus that are like genuinely putting him on the table and saying, I like him, I think he fits a role. I don't see it, I wouldn't do it, but there are other people that are willing to make that gamble, and so I think that keeps him barely out of D tier for me.
I get that. I don't know that I care about other people's opinions in this, in the sense that I think they are important to weigh, but these tier lists are about our experiences, right? And our opinions. We're not trying to reflect other people's experiences that they like him, but what does that mean, right?
I guess I would amend and say I am somewhat persuaded by that argument. Not enough to play him, but enough to keep my mind open about it, right? Okay, so C tier, we've got him between Kalani and Savage. I think that makes sense to me. That seems pretty perfect. Okay, JK, let's talk about our boy, Luke Skywalker Daring Hero, Luke 2.
All right. This is going to be an interesting one. I've played him a few times. He has some great strengths. He's 3 cost first off, which is a fantastic price point where you're not losing a ton from him. He has his cool startup ability out of activation. Grappling hook is fine. I think he is a very perfect middle of the middle B tier figure. I could see sliding him up. I could see arguments of playing him down because people don't play him. I think he's a B tier figure. He's not going to make a list. Dropping him in there isn't going to make a list great, but he is flexible enough in a lot of situations where he's going to have an okay activation. He is going to be defensive enough. He's slightly annoying, but he's not doing anything so good that makes him an A tier. And so that's where I have him. I have him right in the middle. I could see. I also have a bit of blind spots of playing him in rescue box per se, because I've tried to splash him into other things. And so if in rescue box he's better, but I don't think he is. I think other things are outclassing him. And so my general thought is kind of right in the heart of B tier is where Rescue Luke is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've played the rescue box in full quite a bit, and I think he's a totally fine 3-cost secondary. Often my favorite thing to do with him is like pull him first and have him go stand at a midline point with 2 hunger tokens and then say, come do something about it. And once they do, you're fine because he costs 3. I kind of wish that the Timothy Zahn novels were still canon and that you could clone Luke and run Luke 2 under Luke 1. Because then you might have a stew going, but you can't. So yeah, I'm fine with him exactly there between Dengar and Gar. Scott, Sam, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm fine with him there. I think if you want to run Chewie or Bazin Shirt under an 8-cost primary, he is the person you will pick every time. But I don't see a ton of other situations for him. And I think his best thing is his tactic. I think that's the entire reason you bring him. He's not going to be doing a ton for you outside of that, but that's such a powerful ability to be able to use. So I think middle of B is a perfect spot for him.
I wonder if Bodhi will decrease his value, but where he is right now, I think it's totally fine.
We're not.
Yeah, I was just going to say
worrying
that.
about that right now, Sam. We'll worry about that later.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Where he is right now is fine, but I think his value drops out the bottom as soon as Bodhi is available. Because, yeah, 100%. All right, Rex, Clone Commander Rex. Scott and I have talked a lot about how Clone Commander Rex might be the platonic ideal of a secondary. He's great. I think this is a really great summary of Rex. I was playing him in an event recently. I drew his card, and I was like, you know what? Ooh, I don't think Rex can do very much right now, and I reserved him. And then I had this moment of shock because Rex is one of the units that I have played the most in Shatterpoint, and I think that was the first time I have ever reserved him because he couldn't do something that I needed to do when I drew him. He's got out of activation mobility. He's fast. He's got shoves. His healing in a Kenobi list can be crazy. He just kind of is stapled to Kenobi. Think he belongs in A tier. I think his stock has decreased somewhat because there are other competitive options for him now, where previously it was you start with Rex and then you decide who to add second. I would probably put him top. Ooh, I don't know, top of A tier. I think he beats out Callus right now. Like he's still
He
great.
100% beats up Callus. I think Rex
Okay.
is absolutely above them both.
Yeah. Every time I see Rex across from me, I go, crap, Rex. Remember Rex. He does stuff.
In any list that you run him, he is your favorite thing to pull as your first activation because he will just get work done for you. He's so consistent and so good.
He's defensive. He's offensive. He gives movement to other units. He can give movement to himself. He can load up hunkers. When another unit attacks, he can follow up with an attack. He's really good. He's great. Yeah, he deserves to be there 100%.
Okay. Scott, let's talk third sister, Riva.
Third Sister. So I love what they did to Third Sister. So Third Sister was in kind of a firebrand grief Karga place pre-buff. Just why would you ever take her? You weren't really going to take Inquisitors other than Fifth Brother anyway. But if you did, it was always just take Stormtrooper Sergeant. He sucks at the time, but you're going to just take him because Third Sister is way worse. Now, Third Sister to me is an A tier primary. Even though I still think Inquisitors are a B tier list, I think that she elevates. I would put her below Callus, but above Gideon Hask, just because she is the thing in Inquisitors that makes them work. Obviously, Grand Inquisitor is bringing the Force Refresh component, but she is the thing that is enabling so much. She has access to a force jump, which is just better than any sort of dash. Jumping is just always better than dashing. Her Call the Hunt ability is free. That is an ability that should absolutely cost one, and it will cost one when she's wounded, but it's still absolutely worth it to pay. The ability to give either Fifth Brother or Fourth Sister, or a supporting Inquisitorius, a dash and then a 5-die attack means that you're getting the function of essentially kind of 1.5 attacks on her activation, and that's going to allow, oftentimes, particularly because you're giving a dash to an Inquisitor, that has tie breaks, you can take 2 points with her, which we've often talked about. A big litmus test right now, does this have legs, is can you take 2 points in a turn? That's a huge part of this game right now. She has deflect, which, especially with a ranged heavy meta, is, hey, this is a consideration you have to make. Especially because if we're wounding things and getting force back and you're opting into 2 damage on her, that's a big deal. And then her Fear Betrays You ability is one of, I mean, I think it is probably a better reroll ability than Callus except it only applies to her, so it is worse because he can give rerolls to other people, so his is better in that way. But depending on the number of objectives your opponent controls, which most of the time is going to be 2 to 3, 3 if it's your turn, she can reroll that many dice. So getting 3 free rerolls on your attack. I think obviously you want to pair her with Vader 1. I've always been Inquisitor's work best with Vader 1 because she goes from rolling 7 dice to 10 dice with 3 rerolls. She's got perfectly solid expertise, really good defensive expertise. She has crit to fail mitigation on 3. Really good. She's got a perfectly respectable tree. Push on 1, expose, another push on 3. She maxes out if you get the expertise. She's maxing out at 9 damage. So she is a fantastic figure. I feel very comfortable placing her where she is in A tier.
Sam, what do you think?
I think you nailed it there, Scott. She is the defining piece of the All Inquisitors list. She just does everything you need in that list, and where you have her is exactly the right spot.
I think she is sufficiently good that where previously we've said, for example, with Spectre, that it's really bad to run 2 single body supports. Riva does such a great job of elevating her single body supports that you can run both of them and feel fine. I don't know that it's strictly the best compared to splitting that, but you can do it. Whereas with Spectre, you don't want to do it. And Spectre was a great list. It still is a great list, right? I agree 100%. All right, Sam, let's talk about your boy Kraken.
Kraken is C tier with the other Separatists, except for he's better than Kalani. And honestly, in Separatists, he's better than Jango, but he's not as flexible in Jango in that he doesn't go on other lists. And I'll put him behind Barris, is where I put him. Yeah, behind Barris in front of Cody. I think that's great. I think Kraken, honestly, is, again, like we've talked about some other Separatists, he's an A tier figure held back by awful supports. Just those supports are so bad that it literally is dragging down every other Separatist in the game.
Yeah, I was going to add, I have him as an A tier figure in the vacuum, but C stands for separatists.
Yeah, it's very similar to where Republic was when the game first released, honestly, where it's like you have good primaries, you have good secondaries, but the supports are just such a weight that it doesn't matter. I do think we haven't talked about this in this episode yet, but the mission selection also, separatists just really struggle on lists on first contact and odds. They just don't have an option there. And that also really, really hurts their state in the metagame right now, too. But yeah, I agree 100%. Okay, let's talk about the other secondary Mando, JK. Bo-Katan. How's she doing?
I think she is a little bit higher than Gar, in just for, if no other reason, she's more flexible since she has that tag extension. She always added a little bit more with her ability to move, and her defensive bubble. I think she is. I when in doubt, Mando's are B tier. I think she's higher end B tier for sure. I think she's at least over Luke, probably over Dengar, but I think she's right in that very, very B tier feel. She does a lot of things well. She has some clear issues, but if you swapped all of her things out and made her a lot of other factions, she probably becomes an A. And if you did the same thing, she probably becomes a low C. You could turn her into a separatist and she's awful. You could turn her into, clone troopers and she's probably really, really good. And I think she's just a very solid B tier figure who is always going to be exactly where she is in the best possible way for the health of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I like her next to Gar for the symmetry of that. And also, I think they're very, very close. I think that the biggest thing holding her back is that her shove isn't until 3. And that can be really backbreaking for her activations. But otherwise, she is the middle of B tier and has been since the beginning of the game, in my mind.
I've said this from the beginning of the game until now. I still think Gar is better than Bo. I still think that his activations are stronger. I still think that she is super feast or famine. I would literally just move her one spot though, so it's not much of a quibble. But this is the same thing we've had every time I've done a tier list. I was like, I think she's worse than Gar. But it's been the same discussion, so really not much more to add there.
I'll add the era unlock is going to push her above Gar. Deal with it, Sam. Scott, what do you think?
I think the fact that she's giving out bonus protection steadfast to the other Mandalorians puts her over Gar for me. I think that can be that's the difference between wounding and not wounding coverts and clan crees. And you're generally taking clan crees rather than supers. I'm sure there's a place for supers, but I always see clan crees. So I think there's just a synergy there that she just takes it a little bit. I think this is the right spot for me.
All right, so we've got her right above Gar, right below Luke, Daring, Hero in B tier. Okay, let's talk about Clone Commander Pawns. So we used to talk about the Pawns tax, which was if you want to play Mace, part of the problem is that you have to bring Pawns and he's garbage. His change in the patch is really interesting. He's still 7 health, which is not great, but his deployment ability is really, it actually does something now, which is great. And that's, I believe, the only thing that they changed. But also the rest of the landscape of Republic has changed around him. He gives Republic an option to deploy covering on those backline objectives for odds and first contact. I think his home right now is with Mace, or I think my preferred version of the Mace Kenobi list is you run Pawns 2/12. The other thing that has helped Pawns a lot is that there are 4 cost supports in Republic that make it worth playing a 3 cost secondary in order to bring them now. And mostly the 2/12, but also the Wolfpack have gotten better. I also think that he can be a fine option with Vader 1. You run Pawns 2/12, and that can kind of give you some flex options. I think he's still pretty niche in terms of what he offers, and I think that none of the lists he's in that I would run him in right now are like your first or second pick in Republic. But I have brought him as a third, fourth pick to enable Mace, to enable other stuff. I think he's totally reasonable where he is. And I think there's some potential for shenanigans to enable you to run 7 Scorch under 8 cost primaries in the future. I don't want to weigh that too much. But I think Pawns is kind of low B tier. I could see him in C tier, depending on where you guys are.
No. Pawns is absolutely C tier, either under Jango Barris or Kraken. I have played your Mace Pawns, and Pawns is such a liability there. The deployment is the only thing that is helpful, and it is so unimpactful most of the time. I'd put him in C tier above like Cody and Aura because there is that spot for him. I do think that I've seen you play Obi Mace, and it works for you. You're a better clone player than I am, so obviously you can figure that out better than I can. But there's no way he fits in B to me. Again, he's got this one spot, and you've listed a second one that I'm unconvinced about, but He's got this one spot that's pretty niche, and he is a liability in that list when he activates, as he typically is. So I have a really hard time envisioning him anywhere outside of C.
So I've been actually getting a lot of reps with Bonds in preps for Nova. I disagree with you, Scott. But here's the context of this, and this doesn't really super apply to this thing. I've been testing it with 7 Scorch because 7 Scorch will come out by Nova, and I think the shenanigans you do with the 8 cost primaries and that, just Hunter, Pawn, 7 Scorch, he does things for that list that are legitimately excellent. You give that list a go sometime. It's really strong. I think that the way that he helps get around deployment issues is underrated. There's plenty of maps out there that just like now we've seen more and more like scatter in deployment zones, and like that helps with stuff. It gets the people forward. I think he is. I've put him in like a mid tier B slot. Honestly, I think that the advanced deployment is that strong. Like I'm putting him above Luke. I think he's a better 3 in the faction. So this might be one of the ones we've had the most disagreement with so far. But I think I think Pawns is legitimately strong.
But he's not legitimately strong. Like, I agree that his deployment ability is nice and great, but like, he can't attack worth nothing. He can't defend worth nothing. He's got 7 health. Like, his activations are legitimately like just not impactful.
So here's where I disagree with that. His attack is actually totally respectable. I mean, his range attack, he's getting two hits on 1 to 3 expertise. He's got a shove on 2. His historical problem has been that like he doesn't have added mobility other than his tactic dash, and so he has a hard time getting places. But with the higher density and out of activation movement in Republic with Anakin, with other factors there, that helps enormously. The other thing about what Pawns is doing is 2/12 are great now, and 2/12 really, really love the advanced deployment, not just for covering objectives, but it effectively allows them to take one more focus action over the course of the game, which really juices their attack. Wolfpack similarly really, really benefit from the forward deployment. I hear you, Scott. I think Pawns is underplayed right now. I really do.
I guess having played him last week, I was just so unimpressed. I was just wildly unimpressed.
The other thing about Pawns that I kind of don't mind, honestly, he has 7 health. He's going to die, but he has no ways to spend force on his card. So when he dies, he's not impacting your force economy. And so if you're pairing him with Mundi, or if you're pairing him with whoever, he can actually be a net benefit to your force econ. The last thing I'll throw out, and then I'll shut up about it, is having played him in the Mace Kenobi list, specifically being like, hey, how am I going to deal with Anakin? The way that I have thought about that list is like, Pawns is the person that Anakin can kill, and that's it. Like, the Kenobi hunkers make everybody else difficult, and it's okay to have one weak link in order to cover first contact, in order to get some of the other benefits there.
Yeah, I don't have much to add here. I will leave it to all of them. I had him in C. His activation is fine, but he seems so specifically niche that I thought he was in C. But I'm also sorry, Scott. I'm going to fall on the sword and lean to the B, but I'm going to put him at the bottom of B. So that's my.
I don't know if agreeing with the majority is falling on the sword, but I respect your your attempt at saying you have integrity.
Thank you. That's all I really want, is for people to respect me. And so when
wow, well, you're really failing at that, JK. So
I have a lot of work to do, much like Pawns.
All right, Scott, let's talk about Bosk.
Bosk is an interesting figure. So obviously, when the Bounty Hunter box came out, we had the 2 4 costs of Dengar and Boba, the 5 costs of IG, and Bosk at 3. And it kind of felt for the first little while that like the consensus was kind of like Bosk is the only one that's going to see play. And then slowly over time, it has switched where all 3 of the other ones see play, and Bosk does see play, but it is pretty niche and pretty sparing. And oftentimes it is in areas where, hey, we just don't really have a better option because the other option is just hot garbage. I think he's a really solid figure, and I mean that. Like, if he cost 4, I would say he's lacking a little bit. So at 3, I actually say for a 3 cost, he's quite good. His regeneration ability does sort of force your opponent to say, I need to kind of get him in one go. So it's pretty rare that the regeneration is going to proc, because your opponents are either going to avoid him or they're going to put in enough to wound him. But that does sort of force your opponent into certain decision-making points. Even if it never procs, just the possibility of it does impact your opponent's play. Explosive Ordnance Yeah, I guess it's there. It doesn't really get used all that much. Payday, again, they all have payday, they all have that kind of flexibility thing. The problem that he has is that his bounty hunter, we have a job to do, a synergy, he is so rarely played with other bounty hunters because CAD is 9, so you can take a 5 and a 4, so there's no real reason to take Bosk at a 3. And CAD is being paired with stuff that is also a 9, so you don't really have a spot for Bosk in bounty hunters. He's got perfectly solid expertise. His defense is really, really bad. It's 1 to 2 for 1, 3 for 2, and he's rolling 4 dice each. But his tree's good, his offensive expertise. So for me, I would put him either at the bottom of C or the bottom of B or the top of C. I would probably lean towards C because again, he feels like a niche figure. So I would probably put him probably in the same space as Barris. Above or below, I think it's ultimately kind of sixes because I really like what he does. I like his kit. I just think he's always the bridesmaid, and you're only going to take him home if he's the last one at the bar. You know what I mean?
I think that's an excellent description of where he is in the current game. He's just playing fourth fiddle to his three bounty hunter friends, and his regeneration is neat, but it's not super applicable, and not because people usually strain him, just because his defense is bad enough he usually dies before he goes again.
I have had much better success with Bosk. I think his attack is so good. Explosive ordinances, even if you don't use it for itself, you use it for the dash. I think his downfall is that he doesn't have a free dash like most of the bounty hunters do. I think he's a little bit more flexible. I've run him under Thrawn, and he's done work. He is a great skirmisher where you just randomly run him in a direction. I also totally understand that he is in the current world where he is, and he's a little squishier, doesn't provide as much of a boost. But I mean, I think what this ultimately is I would at least argue for him to be a B tier figure, but I think he's maybe even better than that. Like, if you're going to give me a choice between him and Luke, I think I take Bosk over Luke in a faction agnostic system.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I also tilt towards bottom of B for him, mostly because I would probably like to put him at the top of C, but that puts him above Django, and I know JK is dead set on not moving Django. Couple of interesting things about Bosk.
JK. He's not the boss of us.
I control the pointer, but you guys can also overrule me.
Yeah, I do think that Bosk is a totally respectable unit that kind of struggles to find a home, but I think the options to play him, I mean, he has seen play in lists in place of Stormtrooper Sergeant when Stormtrooper Sergeant is too much of a liability, and I think that's a totally respectable thing to do. I think he's probably also a little bit underexplored in Rebel things, but when you're like, hey, I don't want to bring Luke too for whatever reason, and just kind of slot him in there. One rules thing that I think is worth calling out too, and this is kind of more an oversight on his design than anything, is the timing of Payday is such that even if he is strained, which normally would prevent his regeneration from triggering, when you reveal an order card, if it's Bosk and he's strained, you can just pay the force to trigger Payday, which will trigger and remove the strain. And then if he's not dead, he just removes all that damage anyway, which is kind of funny. One thing I should check on is what happens if you kill him that way. I think he's just wounded and you get a wound or a one injured token activation out of him. But that is a funny thing about regeneration, where strain does not actually impact his activation like you would think it would. But I think he's bottom of B tier for me. But I would be fine if he goes in C.
One thing that I want to point out, Matt, is based on something you said, we're talking about like he's in lieu of Stormtrooper Sergeant, and we'll kind of chat about this when we get to that. I think that after some releases, because that's where I would run Bosk. I would run him in lieu of Stormtrooper Sergeant because Bosk would have a much better activation. And I actually think Bosk ends up in Empire most often, or previously did. Stormtrooper Sergeant now, post Krennic release, I would never take Bosk over Stormtrooper Sergeant.
That's
I just
fair.
wouldn't ever. And so that is also part of an impact for me, is that I think even under Thrawn, you would still rather have Stormtrooper Sergeant than Bosk. And people often will pair those two together very specifically for odds and FC play. So
yeah, that's fair. All right, JK's put him in the top of C tier above Django, so I think we've got to live with that. Sam, let's talk about Guarm.
Guarm. He's a weird piece. He's a really weird piece. Here's my struggle with Guarm. I think he's D. I think he's the top of D. The other weak ways are now good. The Hondo era change does legit things, and Hondo has an interesting kit. Weakways are now legitimately good supports. And Guarm's just the weird, awkward middle child that gets forgotten. And that's because he has the same sharpshooter problem that we talked about. He has sharpshooter flavor text, right? Which means he really wants to be paired with like bot, but then those lists get really wonky. And his tactic is interesting in that it moves weakways. That means you're playing the box as is. And here's a place where you would actually probably want to play Bosk more. Just Hondo Bosk weakways. That sounds better than Guarm. Hondo Luke weakways with some rebels. That sounds better than Guarm. There's a lot of things that you'd slot in that sound better than Guarm in his best home. So I think he's a D tier.
JK, thoughts?
I had him really, really low C tier. I have very little to complain about in between the two. I just think he has interesting things. He needs basically 2 extra dice on all of his attacks, and he becomes significantly better. But you know what he doesn't have? 2 extra dice on his attacks. Again, I think he's a bottom C tier figure where because of the upgrades to weakways, he has a home, but also it's not getting played, and so let's D it up, baby.
Yeah. For me, he's built around the synergy of running within the box that he comes in, but neither Hondos or the weakways now care about that synergy all that much. I mean, the joke from last year was who's Guarm, and now it's more like I know who he is, I still don't want him. I like him top of D tier.
I have never played with Guarm, and I've never played against Guarm, and I've never heard of a single person playing with Guarm in any event that I'm aware of. So by definition, I think I have to put him in D tier.
All right, JK, tell us about Chewie.
Ooh, Chewie. I think he is going to be an interesting little topic. He does cool stuff. He's a big beast. He struggles to find a home a little bit. I think he is great in Ewok lists. I also think there might be a better spot or a better Ewok than him. He has a little bit of everything, but not enough of anything. I think he's a above middle B tier figure he's strong. I think you can splash him, but the problem is his splash ability is taken up by a lot of other things that are just a little bit better. I mean, 12 health is stupid. He's on the board and he doesn't die because it takes you 3 attacks to get through his defense. So that's great. But I really like Chewie. I just feel like he doesn't turn lists on. I don't know if that makes sense. He doesn't elevate things as much as I think he should, but he is really good where he is. And I think you could probably slide him up. If you really ran him and you knew the ins and outs, you could slide him into A tier. And I think if you just played him randomly, I think he's pretty solidly 12 health and the amount of defense he has and just all of the stuff he has. I don't think you're ever going to drop him out of B tier just for a pure stat stick. But I think you could get him down to the pretty bottom. I think he's right in the middle of the B tier.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Chewie's problem has always been that his first activation ranges from like middling to pretty bad because his only mobility tool is dependent on the positioning of an allied primary, which is tough. Once he's in the fray, he can do stuff, but he struggles to get there. My big question for you, Sam, is do you see much reason to run him with Cassian, who can help him move around and who can help him stand on a point, or are there just better options always?
With Cassian in particular, I think there's just better options. So I think in Cassian, you're always looking at K2 and Ezra. You're taking at least one of them, right? You want to have some sort of shenanigan like that, and then your other thing is a synergy piece on the list. And I think that Chewie is always. We've talked a lot about people that are always third, fourth options. I think he always is there. I still think he's B because I think that he is a legit option in the Leia Logray list, which I think is a solid list. It's really hard to kill him. JK's right. Those defensive stats just are actually legit. So I like B tier.
So where does he go in B tier? Is he above or below Bo and Gar?
Right below? That's right where he is. He's either above or below them. I lean below, but above works too.
Scott, you have strong opinions on this?
No. I would probably put him below just because I see them played more often.
Yeah, I like him there, JK, below Gar and above Obi-2. All right, let's talk about Clone Commander Wolf. Wolf is interesting because he was one of the few Republic units that didn't get directly touched in the update, but he did have some new life breathed into him. Previously, he always felt like he was your 5th or 6th pick for Republic Secondary. With things shifting a little bit, I think his crit protection is phenomenal, and his activations are consistently very good. He's not quite like Rex level, where he's always going to be able to do something good, but he's not that far off. But I think you really only bring him if you are doing a clone trooper kill list. I was running him in the hunter kit list, and I think he wins a spot there. He may or may not find a home with Delta Squad when they come out. That it seems like there's too many other options you would rather have with Delta. I think Wolf is good. I think that he has the potential to have a home, but I think he still kind of struggles to make the cut unless you're running a very specific list that I don't think is that strong right now. I think he's somewhere high C tier for me, but I could see him low B tier as well.
I have him low B for the fact that I think his tactic is really strong because it moves multiple people at a support. So he, like, that in itself, like being able to move 3 bodies on the turn, really do some interesting stuff. He does some really interesting with pawns on the table with your forward deploy. On shifting, you can take a center line with Wolf. He has some interesting play there in those aggro clone lists that can really swarm the board.
This is where I have him as well. The one thing where we're going to break our own rule of 4th, 5th, 6th option is inside of Republic secondaries, because there are just a lot of really good ones, but also you can kind of point them a little bit differently depending on where they are. And I think just because he is the 3rd or 4th best doesn't mean he's not still a very good pull. And I think it's a bit of a disservice to just kick everyone out if they can't be used. And so that's why I think as a figure, he's a B tier figure.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out, JK. Like, even though he's not making the cut, even in full Republic Premier list, like, you can see the reason for doing so. And I think in terms of impact on the table and even like reasons to play him in the meta, he does rank above first choices in other factions, just because that Republic has so much depth on the bench right now. So yeah, we've got him bottom of B tier, right below Pawns, and currently at the bottom. We'll see how things shake out going forward. All right, Scott, let's talk about Boba Fett.
So Boba Fett, I was pretty low on for a long time, and I've played him more and more. And honestly, I really like Boba Fett. He synergizes with the Empire, though I don't think you'd ever really run him with Empire. I think he works in bounty hunter lists quite well. I really like him in a Cad Cassian scenario. The thing that is really interesting with him in that particular list is that he, I think, gets a bump for me because he has counterplay against some of the really big hitters. So, first off, he is incredibly hard to be displaced by a primary unit that does not have pin. Because at the end of their activation, he will just jump right back on the point you displaced them from, and that can be really frustrating. Me and Kenny had this experience where he had Charming Princess Leia, kept trying to push Boba Fett off, and Boba Fett's just like, I'll like it and get right back in. And so that's was impactful. The fact that, he has the same kind of hunter ability, a primary unit as activation, he gets to jump. You usually want to have him go later so he gets 1 or 2 free jumps before he activates. Then he can either jump again or shoot a primary. I had him do a 5-die attack and then a regular attack with added IG dice and just basically one activation shot a Jin, and that was awesome. The fact secondary just being able to ace down a primary in one activation is a big deal. It's got good defense in terms of expertise, really good defense expertise. Not a ton of dice, but that's okay. That's the trade-off that you get. Pretty solid offense in tree and offensive expertise. His abilities, his wrist rockets and his flamethrower are you wouldn't normally run. There aren't a ton of use cases, at least in kind of prior metas. I do 1 damage to 2 different things. I put a disarm and a pin on something, but guess what? You pin and disarm Anakin, and you have shut that list down. So you just spend a force with Boba to do that. Awesome. And also, if you do the wrist rockets, 1 damage to 2 different things. One damage, as we have found, is a pretty significant breakpoint in a lot of times. And if you wound someone with that and you're running CAD, guess what? You've now recovered 2 force. So you have essentially netted 1 for using that ability. So I think Boba in that specific context is really strong, but I think that he works kind of in general. So I actually am putting him in B tier. I think that he is, I don't care if he's in front of or behind Dengar, but I think he is in the exact same space as Dengar. I might put him 1 forward because I think he has more impact on his activation, but he will die sooner.
Sam, what do you think?
I think those are super fair points. I like Dengar more generally. I think Dengar maybe just has a more proven track record to me too. But Eric performed really well at him at some other GTs. I prefer having Dengar on the table, but this is 6s right here. We're just. I actually think Dengar's a couple spaces ahead of him. I would put Boba further down in B, but I think Scott makes good points.
Yeah, I've only had boba on the table like once or twice, and they were both those funny situations where he didn't do enough, but also I do every time you look at the kit and you kind of go, okay, if this ceiling is through the roof, so, but I also like Dengar a little more, so we're gonna do this and wait, do that the right way, okay. But again, I'm Scott. Everything you said is making me go, I need to run this again and give it another feel to it. So good job, good job,
I
Scott.
have no issue with Dengar being in front of Boba. Again, I think silver and gold, ladies, ain't no losers here. Um, you know, I think they're very close. Part of it is I could see Boba being further down, Sam, based off of some of my prior experience, but I do think Boba is better than Luke. I feel that. I think he is just more impactful, and like he doesn't have the same strong tactic that Luke does, but he's got a ton of stuff in the kit. And in the bounty hunter synergy, him rolling 3 extra dice really turns him on.
Yeah.
You have more reps than me too, so I'm happy to default to you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was for a minute I was brewing in my whole thought was, hey, Boba Fett can have the Empire tag and also the Bounty Hunter tag. And so what if you run Vader 1 Vader 1 Cad with IG-88 so that Boba Fett can get +6 dice on a melee attack? And I ran the math on it, and it turns out if he gets +6 dice, he's going to max tree like 80% of the time, which means he's like killing everything. So like if you are a huge Boba Fett fan, you might want to try that and just watch Boba Fett kill people. I'm not confident that the rest of the list is worth that much, but it would be fun. I think he's a 10 out of 10 like win on the design because his job is he's the secondary that like entangles a primary and says like you cannot go anywhere until you deal with me first. And if he's ever going to have a moment to shine, it's like right now when Anakin is everywhere, when like we have these big hitter primaries that are doing a lot of work. But I also agree you kind of have to build around him to make it work. I like him exactly here. Also, Scott, I'm really disappointed that you did not make a single like Boba Fett wear joke in the whole process here. You know,
I was going to say, so we're placing him Boba Fett where, but I failed
Yeah.
it. I'll take that one. I'm sorry.
Well, you spoke too soon, Matt, because I was going to say Boba Fett joke where? Because it wasn't here.
Oh.
It was giving people the opportunity to, when they listen to the episode, make the joke themselves. I'm playing 5D chess. Get on my level.
I fell into your trap. I apologize. That's 100% on me.
Big Sarlacc.
Yep. All right, Sam, let's talk about Ezra. First of all, I just want to say Ezra sucks, but that aside, we can continue.
We'd like to point out that for those who don't know that joke, it's also spray painted on my terrain. Ezra was a horribly overpowered figure in Imperial Assault, which we all played prior to Shatterpoint. And so we continue the Ezra hate to this day.
I think Ezra's the very top of A tier. He's not quite S tier, but I think he is the best A tier secondary in the game. I think that every Rebels list should be playing Ezra. Like, he does so much by being a tiebreaker and having good trees and that annoying defensive expertise, and synergizes so well with so many things. And then he sees play outside of Rebels too. You see the all tiebreaker lists do well, the Moff Cassian stuff do well. He has applications in a lot of different places. I don't think those are his best homes per se, but it kind of adds this repertoire of he fits everywhere. And I think you put him in other factions and there would be like, yes, I want an Ezra Bridger in my faction. That the double momentum when wounding supports, turns out supports are what get wounded most of the time. So Ezra is good at getting you double momentum. He's just a fantastic piece.
He is one of the figures that when Spectre Cell came out, I wasn't running him a ton. And so I don't have much about him other than he seems like he is going to be a figure that if new players pick up, they can whiff with him. I've seen occasionally where on the other side stuff happens and I'm like, oh yeah, you had Ezra too. Oh, okay, cool. But in the hands of strong players, in the hands of people who know it, even if you got a couple of reps with him, yeah, he's really good. I'll discuss Rex up there above him, but just because I think Rex is so strong and perfect. But I'm also gonna let Ezra be the top if that's the consensus.
No, I'm with JK. So I absolutely think Ezra in A. I think Ezra is better than Callus. I think Ezra is better than, well, yeah, I think Ezra is definitely better than Callus. He is not better than Rex, and here's my argument. Does not have the ability to generally speaking, I guess very niche situations, but he generally is not going to be swinging more than 1 point on his activation, whereas Rex has a stronger ability to do so. Rex has stuff he can do outside of his activation when another figure is attacking. He is giving out hunkers. The list that Rex goes in and is a critical part of is one of the strongest meta lists now. Now, Ezra is also a really strong piece with like Kanan, obviously, and Kanan Cassian is a great, very strong list. Although I think Kanan Cassian against Obi Mace or Obi Cam or Obi anything probably has a tougher time. I think Ezra's attack leaves a lot to be desired. I actually think that against certain supports, Ezra, unless there's damage on them already, he is not necessarily likely to wound them. And also, I think there's some circumstantial pieces there. I think Ezra is a very good figure, but I think Rex is just better. Kind of overall.
Yeah, I actually agree with. Do go ahead, Sam.
Here's my counter to that. Like, I think if you're playing, this is gonna sound crazy. I think if you're playing Republic, you would rather have Ezra. You would rather have a tiebreaker. No, I mean, if he was Republic tagged, you would rather have Ezra than Rex, because what he's doing with the tiebreaker, what he's doing with jumping with the Jedi, I think that is more impactful.
So what you're saying is, if the world was different, I would have a different opinion.
Well, so I think he's better than Rex, just straight up. And I think that if you swap tags, if they were both Rebel, so if I put Rex in Rebel and Republic at the same time, and I put Ezra and Rex in Republic and Rebels at the same time, I'm taking Ezra over Rex.
Right, but that's sort of a nonsense argument, because it's like, ooh, Rex was built to be with Republic, so giving him Rebel tag makes no consequence. Also, Rex has so much more synergy with Obi-Wan than Ezra would have. And I think the fact that he's giving out hunkers that are not going away, increasing the defensive aspect. Ezra is a great figure. Ezra can whiff, and Ezra can get the shit kicked out of him. I don't see Rex get the shit kicked out of him, and I see him very rarely whiff.
I agree with Sam on this one, and I don't think it's a nonsense argument. I think the point there that is I agree with is tiebreaker is powerful, and I also think that like if Ezra could also have a tiebreaker and also the Obi-Wan identity, that would be a problem, like actively a problem in the game. But I think Ezra's really good. I think Ezra, much like his mom in Hera, is like low skill floor, high skill ceiling. Like really good players, just Ezra is just a menace. He is just the most obnoxious thing on the table. I think Rex has a pretty high skill floor and a pretty high ceiling in terms of like what you expect from his activations. Rex's activations are always good, and he has a little bit more swing potential. But I think Ezra wins out for me in terms of his flexibility. He is always good. He's not tag reliant in the same way that like Rex is, and also he represents a more important factor for his faction, whereas there are plenty of Republic lists that are happy to not play Rex, where every single Rebel list wants to play Ezra.
That statement, but I mean that's fine. I mean, I agree. Ezra's a fantastic figure. Mostly, I just think the idea of like we don't evaluate. Well, if they had this tag, they would be so good. We evaluate what tags they have.
Yeah, we're not evaluating based on what ifs, but it's a thought experiment to illustrate.
Well, if you're making an argument based off of a what if, then you are evaluating on a what if. But that's all I'll say on that.
I'm putting Ezra on top because he breaks ties. Also, Ezra sucks, so deal with it.
All right, JK, thanks for saving that one for us. JK, let's talk about everybody's favorite Ewok, Paplo.
He's a D tier unit. I've seen what most of them can do. I don't even have much to say. I don't know where he fits in here. He's probably better than Firebrand because I think there are things that he can do inside the Ewok faction that are yada, yada, yada. He is the most interesting, uninteresting figure in the game. I love the stuff that they did with him that just doesn't matter. Like the reverse expertise idea, the fact that... But the problem is all of it kind of ends up backfiring on you and just makes him bad. He's never ever going to see play, and he is Poplo.
Yeah, no notes. I think D tier between Grief and Firebrand makes perfect sense to me. Scott, Sam, anything to add?
No.
Okay. Sorry, Paplo. Maybe you'll get a buff sometime in a year and a half. Who knows? All right, let's talk about Clone Commander Phil. Phil is the other Republic 3-cost secondary. He just came out. I think Phil has a lot of interesting-ish pieces, but he feels like a character that very clearly was designed trying to solve the problem of a Mace Windu that no longer exists in the game. I think his ability to reposition Jedi primaries out of activation is very, very cool and has a lot of potential, but it is force expensive, and he is not bringing the same kind of punch that you are seeing in the other Republic secondaries. I think he is C tier, middle-ish, low-ish end of C tier. I think he's above Nadar, but not by much. He's fine. I can see niches to maybe play him, but they are very niche indeed. Like, his stats are fine, but you have better options almost always.
His some of his abilities. I think putting him just next to Nadar is perfectly appropriate. I love his commanding presence ability. Just hey, if they would take a condition, they suffer damage instead. Sometimes that would suck, but sometimes that will, save your butt and save your activation. It's just, yeah, it's kind of hard to find a place for him. I'm sure it exists, but it's just hard.
Yeah, I think Pons eats a lot of his lunch now too, where Pons does something unique in the Republic 3 slot where Phil is, again, fixing a problem that's no longer a problem.
I've heard new slang for this, Matt, that my wife was teaching me because she teaches middle schoolers.
Tell me what the youths are saying now.
He's trying, and I apologize if I use this wrong, but Phil is trying to reheat Pons's nachos. I guess that's what the kids are saying now. If you try to unsuccessfully kind of imitate or do the same thing as someone who did it better, you are unsuccessfully reheating their nachos.
If you are one of the youths out there and we're doing this incorrectly, jump in the Slack and tell us, because I would love to hear. But
actually,
otherwise,
no. If you're using this correctly, leave the Slack right now. Get out of here. Take your nachos elsewhere.
All right, Scott, let's talk about Death Trooper Escort. I hear he's pretty good.
Yeah, so Death Trooper Escort, so I'm going to make a slightly controversial take, because the argument always was, and the argument was right, that the Death Trooper Escort and Rex are identical figures, but the Death Trooper Escort is slightly better because he has protection and because he has the ability to give a dash and or an advance to units, and he has his defensive capability where when he's hit, he can reposition and hunker if he's not engaged. So normally the space for him would be right in front of Rex. I'm actually going to argue for him being slightly below Rex. And this is my argument. Rex is in a really meta competitive list right now that is doing really impactful stuff. I do think the Death Trooper Escort is a better figure than Rex. I think he is a better figure than Ezra. I think that Empire is in a really tough place right now, and for meta considerations, while Death Trooper Escort is absolutely an essential bring if you want to be running Empire, particularly in a premier list, he needs to be below Rex. You could maybe make an argument for him being below Callus. I'm not, but maybe you could. Still above Reva, but definitely below Rex. But I'm open to...
I am fascinated by this because, I still think that it is an S tier figure, but I totally get every single thing you said tracks. But yeah, does he have that S? Is he in an S tier list currently? That's the question. I guess we may not know, but what he produces,
figure, absolutely. Yeah. But I'm basing this on meta considerations.
Correct. Yeah, and which we have. And so I'm not opposed to your general thought process. I'm just walking through my own brain right now, and it's terrifying in there. Sam, Matt, thoughts?
I came into this fully expecting to put him into S, but you make a good point, Scott. The thing is, I could see this changing on a dime. It's so easy for me to call him S as soon as we see Empire really do strong again. We've kind of seen the seeds of that at Gen Con. You've also just played him more than me, and I've realized that post-patch, I have been just generally less scared of DTE on the table than I was pre-patch. So what you said is compelling to me. I'm willing to default to where you said for now. And honestly, your point was compelling that, there's probably some arguments for him being beneath Callus in some regards, but I'm happy right below Rex.
Yeah, one thing that I think is also important is, and I'm sorry to cut you off, Matt, but is that a lot of the things that he was working with also got nerfed. That when we said he was an S tier unit, he was getting Gideon Hask dice additions. He was getting to move Dark Troopers who were better. He was getting to move ISFs who were better. And so all the stuff that we went, oh, he's enabling all this stuff, everything's just gotten slightly worse. And so while he has stayed exactly the same, the world around him has changed.
Yeah, no, I agree with that a lot. I think what's interesting to me is that like, of the secondaries that we have discussed so far, I think Death Trooper Escort is the one most likely to get nerfed potentially in the future. I even think I think Shock T is great. She is S tier. She is phenomenal. But I also don't necessarily think that she needs to be tuned down. I think she has discrete weaknesses. But I agree with that placement. The other thing that I think is interesting to note with Death Trooper Escort is, again, in a metagame where Anakin is popular, he is one of the few primaries or secondaries in the game that has a defensive tech that can just dodge the second attack. Like, he can use his reposition active to move away from Anakin and out of engagement range and prevent, stuff the Anakin to double tap, which is not nothing. But I agree, like, the rest of Empire is in a tough enough spot that it's hard to rely on that as if that was one tool in your belt, it would be great. But it can't be your whole game plan. So yeah, I like him there, right below Rex, right above Callus. I think that makes sense. Okay, Sam, let's talk about Boosh. Leia, I guess she's technically Leia 2, but she's just Boosh.
This is absolutely crazy, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I put her in B tier just because of how good I think she is in that one particular list. Like, if it wasn't for that list, I think she's a D tier figure in any other list. And I think in that list, she just does something really unique and powerful. And so I put her in B tier in that Cad Cassian list that we've talked about. But I can't put her high in B tier because she's niche. But I think she does strong, unique things there. And I could entertain some C tier things here. I'm interested in where you guys are putting her.
I think you've defined a C tier figure, Sam, where you've said in a niche setting, one particular list, she does cool stuff. I think that she probably, for me, because I think she is better than Bosk in the context of that one list. She's probably worse than Bosk everywhere else. So I think putting her in towards the top half of C tier is where I would feel comfortable.
That's my thought too. I was actually really curious about this when we were coming in. I was trying to figure out where I was going to slot her, and I ended up just high C because yet she is powerful enough in that singular thing that you can't just throw her away. She then is just attached to IG-88 on top of everything else, so you can't even run her outside of. You literally have to have that singular list, and I think that is the specific idea of a C tier, and I'd be fine placing her anywhere in there. I have her fairly high in mine. I think it's in the top 3, but obviously this is slightly different than where ours is. So I feel you, but yeah, that's what I would do.
To add some context here, if you're not as deep in it as we are, so the specific thing here is that Boosh's problem has always been that her attacks are just not very good, and she struggled to make an impact, but she had a lot of cool tools. Getting bonus dice from IG-88 makes her bad expertise on attacks not matter because she's just rolling a bunch of extra dice. Her attacks are good. She has diceless displacement, which is like genuinely pretty rare in the like Galactic Civil War era period, and especially is rare for Rebels. I think Kanan is the only other figure in Rebels that has displacement, if I'm remembering correctly. And so she does a lot of interesting work there, but the specific combos in the Cad Cassian list, you should listen to our episode on that where the JK and Sam did a deep dive on previously if you're interested in more of that. I like her close to top of C. I think that her ceiling in that list is much higher than Bosk, but Bosk wins out a little bit on flexibility for me.
If you 6 months ago asked us, there's no way we would have her anywhere but D and the lowest end of D. So the jump here is pretty big.
Absolutely. Speaking of that, JK, let's talk about IG.
Okay, IG-88 honestly is in a very similar position as Boosh in terms of 6 months ago he had no home whatsoever. He's a five cost secondary that is only existing to lift up other bounty hunters. I mean, he does stuff on himself, but realistically, his biggest contribution is that he gives every other bounty hunter can he spends a force, and bounty hunters attacking an objective you don't control get 3 extra dice on their attack. If you fail, you lose momentum. And before the CAD boost, it was 1, cost too much, and 2, you didn't have a home because there wasn't a place for another 9 costs primary and or 8 with the 3 cost secondary support because they don't really exist in bounty hunters. And so he was probably a very solidly low-end C-tier figure a couple months ago. I think now he is. I don't think he's an A-tier figure because, again, I think he's attached to a singular list, to a singular group of lists. I think he's slightly more flexible, but I think he falls slightly under the Boba Fett area section of he's probably right around right in the middle of B tier. He has good activations. He doesn't have great activations. He doesn't get a swing to 2 points. He doesn't move other people. And so he has a lot of small, like frustrating limitations that keep him out of being the spectacular figure, but he does enough and he really accelerates that Cad Cassian list that we've talked about. And it's a popular winning list right now that I think just for sheer symmetry, you probably put him below Boba Fett just out of through all the B bounty hunters in a big box.
Scott, what do you think? Or no, Sam, go ahead.
So I actually would put IG-88 at the bottom of A tier. And here's why I would put him there. One, I don't think you can put him below the 2 bounty hunters that are where they're at kind of because IG-88 exists. I think IG-88, his activation is really powerful. The fact is that because he can use his own ability himself. So he's going to be rolling 11 dice. He's got strong expertise, strong tree. He has the ability to just focus. He gets a starts activation, dash. Is there someone within 5? Almost certainly there is. Focus. Do you want to add 3 dice? Sure. Cool. Do you want to recover 2 of those force and then heal Cad Bane? Yeah, I do. And yeah, you're right, JK, that he is probably not taking 2 points unless he's like typing someone else and bodying another point. But the fact is that we think about later where everyone was turning on so many parts of a list with his ability, and that's what IG-88 is doing. And the fact of the matter is that without IG-88, Cad Cassian doesn't really work because you just don't have the force economy is really dependent on consistent wounding, and IG-88 is such an important part of that. And so for me, yeah, he feels like a bottom of A tier figure. Honestly, I would put him above Gideon Hask, in my opinion.
Scott, you just took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to say. I had him above Gideon Hask because I think he is the engine that makes all the other bounty hunters good. So I that's where I have him. He is the thing that raises all the others up, and he's what makes everyone come together in a cohesive whole that is strong.
I don't hate it. I'm perfectly fine with it. I agree. I think on top of turning it on, I think it focuses the list, but also I think there might be a detriment to the focusing of the list. You're no longer you're just murdering things, which is fantastic and fun and all those things, but you're sacrificing basically everything else for it. You don't have just what like Boosh does, but you're typically taking on lesser activations outside of it to make sure that the bounty hunters are getting in there. And I think that you could probably make other things run with it, but I also don't want to theory craft it whatever o'clock at night this is. And so I am perfectly fine seeding this and sliding him up higher than I have him.
For this, putting him in A tier a little bit, but I am persuaded. I often think of A tier as like these are the units that are the payoff for running their list. And I think IG-88, no question, fits that definition. So absolutely. But A tier between or below Reva, above Gideon Hask makes perfect sense to me. All right, let's talk about Padawan Ahsoka Tano. She's really interesting because she also is just the same as she has been in the game since very early on, since right at the beginning. If you were in the pre-order crowd, like I think all of us were, she has a lot of weaknesses, but she has really shot up because I think she's a very straight down the middle B tier character who has shot up in the metagame because she has phenomenal synergy with Anakin and with Ki-Adi-Mundi, who are 2 of our top 5 primaries in the game and are played together. And so we very much are in the camp that you should be. There's some debate about what secondary you put under Anakin, whether it's Rex, whether it's Barriss, whether it's whoever. But I think all of us here are very much in the snips goes there camp. Giving Anakin the extra chance for out of activation mobility just improves his chance of impacting the table so much. I think she's high B tier. I don't think it quite pushes her into A tier, but I would put her somewhere around the range of. I would put her above Wrecker, probably, maybe above K2.
I'm above K2. I think that Ahsoka assists her list. I think the synergy with the clone supports where she can make an additional attack move out. I think the fact that she can jump twice and can go to a back. I often will just use her to take a back point. She doesn't need to attack. She just needs to move, hunker, jump twice, steal a back point from my opponent. I love Ahsoka. I would never swap her out. People talk about, you could run Rex with Anakin. I was like, nope. I mean, I love Rex, but I'm never not running Ahsoka in that slot. She's a Jedi. She benefits from Ki-Adi-Mundi. if you got there. So I think she's top of B tier.
Yeah, I think what. Go ahead, Sam.
I flirted with the bottom of A tier with her, but I ended up in the top of B tier. I don't think she's quite defining enough to hit the A tier mark. But yeah, she's excellent, especially in her current meta.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she's fragile enough, and I think that her activation attacks specifically can be low impact enough that I think it keeps her out of A tier for me. But top of B tier is great. All right, Scott, let's talk about Darth Vader Fallen Master, or Vader 3.
Darth Vader Fallen Master, a man for whom I am sad. So Darth Vader Fallen Master on paper seems really, really good, and I think he falls short for me. So he has a Force Profession mechanic. I mean, he's got Vader 2's Force Profession mechanic, really powerful. So, he can heal, get rid of a condition, dash, recover force, as long as he's not strained and all that stuff. So he's got movement. He has diceless displacement, although it's, a pull, so it's a little different. It's a little tricksy, but it still kind of works. He's got this big objective swing, his protection, steadfast, impact one. He's really good at like coming in and taking a point from one person. He's really good at holding the point, and that all again seems amazing. His attacks leave a lot to be desired for me. I find that when he rolls high, when he hits hard, and I love that. But he is very consistently. He's only rolling 7 dice, which is perfectly reasonable for a secondary, but he doesn't have a ranged attack, so he needs to be in melee range. His expertise is hit, block to a fail, and then for 1 to 2 XGs, and then for 3, it's crit, hit, block to a fail. Perfectly reasonable, but oftentimes he is only getting 2 steps. At least that's been kind of my experience. And he doesn't hit, he hits 5 damage on his 3rd step. He's got 3 damage there. So oftentimes he's doing 2 pushes and 2 damage, which is perfectly respectable, but not when he takes up 5 points of your list. And also, it means you're not bringing Vader 2, it means you're not bringing Vader 1, and you're not bringing Anakin. It's kind of that same issue of like with the Ahsokas and the Anakins and the Leias, we're limited by this fact. And so for me, I oftentimes would rather have Vader 2 that is going to have a big impact and kind of be my primary. And it's tough because, okay, well, he's an Inquisitor, so you could run him with GI, but okay, who do you run then? Because he costs 5. There's not really a 3-cost support you can bring that really makes sense there because you want the Inquisitor supports. And so you kind of have to take a weird primary. He just doesn't really fit very well for me. I think that because of his incredible defensive ability and the fact that he does have diceless, I would never put him in C tier, but I would probably put him in the lower half of B tier. I'm probably going to put him probably around the same place as Chewbacca. And I'd probably put him between Gar Saxon and Chewbacca.
Yeah, I have limited experience with him, but I haven't been overly impressed. It's one of those things where you see it, the stats on the paper are there, but what comes out, it just doesn't one for one add up. I might argue a little bit lower on the B tier just because, again, in the world of meta, where does he fit? And the answer is somewhere. Like that's the best I can do. But I know that there are lists that run him, but I'm not opposed to this. I also don't think as a whole people are running him as much as we really need to figure out where he should land.
I've been impressed. I like where he is. I've been impressed by some. He has some very impressive activations. He can do some pretty cool things. Most of the time, that relies on diceless displacing someone on one point, attacking someone on another, and then paying a force to test something else. But that costs a ton of force, and so you got to be in like Grand Inquisitor list. I've seen a Grand Inquisitor Cad Bane list that I think is interesting in that regard, where it has a ton of force, and you can play some, Inquisitor supports with that. So I think there's some interesting applications for him. But Scott's right, JK's right, that he hasn't really found a defining place yet.
I've got nothing to add here. I think his spot is great between Gar and Chewie. All right, let's do Sabine. Sam, you want to talk to us about Sabine?
Yeah, I think Sabine is B tier because I think to me, she's pretty clearly the third option of the Spectre supports. And what she does is good, but what she does is also just worse than the other two in a lot of areas. And then she has some interesting other niches. When you compare her, her defensive expertise is good, but her dice pool is bad, which makes her worse defensively mathematically than both Callus and Ezra, which is an interesting math thing to note. Her attacks are worse than Callus's mathematically, and if they only get better than Ezra's if she gets the focus, and she doesn't like add the other like interesting synergies that Ezra adds. She does give some out of activation movement, but in a kind of a sneaky way that's it's not as like it always as impactful as it seems, as like the other specters kind of can make up for that in other ways. She's still good, don't get me wrong. She's still going to see some play in some places. Protection's good, and she has her bomb that can add some chip damage and stuff. So she's a B tier for me. I honestly probably put her next to the other Mandalorians on just in front of them, I think. And sometimes she sees some play there too. She does some interesting things, but nothing like super splashy, which is a shame for a character who is very splashy.
Yeah, I have her. I actually have her at the top of my C tier list in terms of she is like a jack of all trades, master of none. I never see people throwing her in lists, and I know they're out there. I'm not too crazy, but I just every time I see her on the other side, I feel like it's perfectly fine and it's completely replaceable. There's a term in sports called a jag, which is just a guy, which is someone you can just replace with any other random person. And I just feel like that is with Sabine with me, but also you are in the dozens and dozens and dozens of Sabine games, and I am in the single digits of Sabine games. But I just find her totally replaceable in any sort of situation, and she only has a handful of situations where her thing really matters. But that being said, I also just might be lower on her than everyone else, and that happens.
Yeah, I think the most unique thing that Sabine does is that she turns on the like Mando Spectre cross synergy. So I think the most common place to see her right now is in a like Kanan core list where you want to run Mando as a third squad in addition to like a Leia or Hera squad, and then also have like a Cassian squad or something like that. Like, and I think that's a really solid premier list, but it does kind of feel like the Mando squad is still the weak link. I like her where she is. Yeah, Scott, anything you want to throw in here?
Everyone said everything. I feel perfectly fine with her where she's at.
Okay, JK, tell us about Paz Vizsla. Speaking of Mandos.
Speaking of Mandos, Paz is a I think I'm a little higher on Paz than what the common world has become, but I also understand that he is bad in large maps. He has a lot of small issues that lead to a lot of bigger issues, and he just when he goes off, when he does his thing, he is phenomenal. I played a practice game where someone wounded Armorer, and he came back and wounded their person right back, and so he's retaking points, and it was just game over. He obliterated someone, but he is also just super easy to play around. He can get left behind. He struggles to get where he needs to be and who he needs to get around. I think he is probably right in the top area of C tier, where he has a defined spot, but he literally has one spot that he can go to. He can only play under the armorer, and he might not be the best slot in that slot, because you could argue that Bo playing a point down is as good, if not better, in a lot of the matchups.
So I've been flirting with Paz near the bottom of B tier because I think he's uniquely situated to be good in this meta. Like, I think he's a unit that's being a little slept on. But that's kind of theoretical. I think he's better than where the general community is valuing him. Like, I think he's like in that Wolf Pond's OB2 kind of bottom of B tier area where he's doing something unique into Anakin. We're seeing less odds in first contact than ever, and he is good on shifting and sabotage, and he does some other unique things into these super aggro lists that we see, whether it be bounty hunters or other things. So I think that in this particular meta, he's currently a bottom of B tier figure. I think that could easily drop once we see odds more, but I think he's better than he kind of ever has been right now.
I think he occupies a very similar space to Vader. So for me, Paz was such a forceful figure when it came out, and then we all figured out how to play around him. And that's his big weakness, is that he's not very hard to play around, and he is kind of by definition niche in that he really wants to be with other Mandalorians. But I do think that Sam is right that with shifting and sabotage being far more often played and odds being a kind of the minority now, I think again he occupies kind of a Vader 3 spot. Kind of a weird place, good stats. Yeah, it can work. It's not super obvious. I think I would put him above or below Vader 3.
I'm on board. I think I put him below that. But yeah, I think my mind had still there's still a bit of me that's living in the Iden odds or against the odds world where everyone was running the same map and you just had to leave him. I actually might need to pick him back up and try to grind with him a little bit more again. So I'm with you guys. Matt, do you have any counter thoughts?
It's really interesting because I do think that he has some unique tools into Anakin, but I also think he's not great into Kenobi things, and he's really vulnerable to diceless displacement. And so, just speaking from my own perspective of the way that I'm thinking about Premier List is that if I see Mandos on the other side of the table, I'm pretty happy to slam like Kenobi Mundi and then say, sorry about you. But that's probably too niche of a consideration. I think he's good. I do actually think I rate him higher than Bo and Gar. And so, like, I think in terms of impact on the table, he's higher. I just think his flexibility is lower. And so it depends on like how those things shake out for you. But I think middle of B tier is a great spot for him.
Let's put him by all the Mandalorians, right? Just he can chill there by the other three.
Yeah, we are nothing if not for order.
All right. Next up for me is going to be Crosshair 1, which is the secondary Crosshair, which I'm sure will not be confusing to anyone. Just to be extra clear, this is the Crosshair that comes in the Bad Batch box. He's the secondary, not the primary that we dunked on in our last episode. I think Crosshair is a good unit. I think his attacks are solid. I think he has a lot of mobility. He can do some cool stuff, but I think he's just kind of outclassed in Republic. I have seen people valuing him over, Wrecker or Wolf or whoever in some of the clone kill lists. I don't. I have seen some people talking about doing like an Anakin kill list with Lumi that includes a Crosshair. I think Crosshair is a good secondary to run under Lumi because he adds some kill threat fairly effectively. But I just think that there are very few situations where I feel like he's actually a really viable choice. I think he's C tier. I would rank him below Cody, maybe right below Kalani, above Phil, but I could be talked out of exact placement in C tier. But like I think Cody does a lot of what he wants to do, but more now.
Put him wherever you want. I trust you.
Yeah, I get the idea. I don't think it was done the right way in terms of I think everything wasn't enough. He needed to be enough of something, and he's the 7th or 8th best secondary right now where I can get value out of everyone else.
Yeah. I think he primarily suffers from the fact that he came out in the same box as Wrecker, and the Bad Batch box was kind of on that wave of we're starting to actually give Republic good stuff, but not crazy good meta-defining stuff yet. And so he's kind of the first wave of the good stuff, and he was the weakest link in that box for the most part. So I think that's where it is. All right, Scott, let's talk about Stormtrooper Sergeant. We've been teasing that long enough, I think.
Yeah, so Stormtrooper Sergeant was just a hot piece of garbage for a long time. He has stayed exactly the same, and he is now less of a hot piece of garbage, and is actually probably your go-to 3-cost secondary. Not that there's a ton, Empire, solely for the fact that there are more Stormtrooper tags in existence, and his ability went from being like, hey, my garbage attack can have one more die, to 4 out of my 6 units will add 3 dice to one of their attacks on their activation for free. Specifically, if you're running, say, Death Trooper Escort, Death Trooper Specialist, Death Troopers, Stormtrooper Sergeant, Shore Troopers, Death Trooper Specialist, or Escort, and then Death Troopers, yeah, you can add 3 dice whenever any one of those people is attacking. And so that becomes a huge impact. He has still his ability to just say, hey, you guys can advance for a damage. You don't love that damage, but with Thrawn being able to pair them together, you get to reserve the sergeant for free, and you can also pay to move him up, because his big issue is that he doesn't have the ability to move himself on his activation. His attacks aren't worth anything, but the issue is just simply he just can't get up into the fray. Adding 3 dice to his attacks actually means he might make it more than one step on his tree, which can be a big deal. And so his attacks are better now, and he has a figure that can give him movement. You have other kind of synergies with Death Trooper Specialists that allow him to move up a little bit. So for me, he is sort of gone from what I would consider like a low C tier, you take him because you have to I think he's a middle of B tier. I think he exists in the same space as Luke and Sabine. So I'd put him right up in between those two mothers.
I would actually rate him slightly above, just above Luke, because I think that, like, in terms of place in the faction, Sergeant enables you to do stuff like bring Vader to for Empire or to play Thrawn that are just much more valuable than what Luke enables in his faction.
Totally fair.
Okay. Man, Sergeant has had a bit of a glow up. I'd love to see it. Sam, tell us about your man crush, Lobot.
Lobot's a ton of fun. He is a really cool unit. He fits in a lot of interesting and unique lists. Honestly, I think he is the best of the weird 5 cost secondaries that like don't really have a home of the Paz Vader thing. But despite that, I think that's about where he is. He's a B tier who has some cool lists. He has lockdown, which is cool. His focus net thing is good. As soon as he takes a wound and that costs force, you're really, really sad. And he will take a wound because he's pretty squishy. He has the interesting disarm on expertise that is fun. He does cool things. He has cool lists. None of them are really breaking the meta, but they're solid. You're not going to be ashamed to put Lobot on the table.
He's the tinkerer's dream, where you could just put so many things with him. But every time I see someone put a list, I go, I feel like you could replace 2 of those things and make a really good list instead of this kind of weird list. I'm also not splitting up the Mandos because they're stronger together, so he is going below Paz. But I always think that Lobot's going to break the game, and then it kind of just fizzles. And it not really fizzles, but like he just doesn't quite take it to the next level is my issue with what I always feel like from Lobot.
I've seen him do some cool stuff for sure. I think the like double lockdown secondaries with Cassian thing is really obnoxious. And again, some matchups it can just be like, well, I guess I lose, right? I have also seen Lobot do some pretty crazy things to juice up Princess Leia, in particular in a Leia Cassian list. If Leia gets the free focus and the mobility, she is just traveling all over the map, and she goes from doing consistent shoves and some blink damage to, oh no, she's just going to one-shot you. But I think that it's like, you can win games with that. I don't think it's the top of the meta curve at all. I would actually rate him above all the Mandos who are stronger together, but I think it's pretty close. Even though that's a jump of 4 slots, I think they're all pretty tight in there together.
I don't think the jump between Bo down to like Chewie is really that big.
Oh, but you got to keep Sabine with the Mandos though.
Well, and now Paz is on a different level. We'll cross that bridge next time.
Okay, JK, tell us about Wicket.
Ooh, Wicket. Wicket's a phenomenal little piece. He's hypermobile. He is just an offensive kill machine. He finds something, he goes and he kills it. He's enough supporty that he doesn't feel bad, but he has a small chance of turning 2 because you can push someone. He is absolutely going to obliterate something, but he's also going to get obliterated. He is, in the best way possible, he is the opposite of the coin of Chewie. And he is that figure that you are either taking Chewie or you're taking Wicket. If you want more killy stuff and a little bit more control, you take Wicket. If you want more defense and you want to really play on Logray's buff, you take Chewie. And Wicket is really, really fun. Like, nailing a character in terms of making a perfectly designed character. I don't know if he's perfectly designed for the movie because you see him for the whole of, 60 seconds or whatever, but he is really, really well built in terms of a Shatterpoint secondary. I mean, I think he's just attached to Chewie. Put him above him, put him below him is going to be your soup du jour. And I am going to put him, wait, which one do I have him? I have him above him. He is going above him right now. That being said, I don't think there's a bad answer.
I would rate him slightly below Chewie just because I think Chewie potentially has other applications than the rest of Rebels, whereas like Wicket is just stapled to the Ewoks list, or really the Leia Logray list, and even then only sometime. But you're right, it's super close.
I'm willing to default to JK as you're the guy who plays the list. You know which one feels more impactful on the table.
I agree with the fact that Chewie can be out in more things. I think it's a perfectly solid argument of the splitting hairs that we're doing.
Okay, well, I will let you have the final decision on that, JK. It looks like your decision for now is under Chewie, above OB2. You good with that? Okay, our last Republic secondary is probably the one that you did not remember, which is Sabe. I think Sabe is a really good secondary in a lot of ways. She has a lot of the right numbers. She has a lot of the right tools. Her entire problem is that she has the wrong keywords. She is tagged around handmaid and stuff, and that means that she has a hard time finding a home, and in particular, Padme is not great. And so, right, Salbe is kind of the best piece in the Padme box, I think, but she's not quite good enough to be able to make the cut. I really struggle with what to do with Salbe because since she has come out, I've thought about like, oh, you could just drop her in other Republic stuff like coordinated assault, where she gets to dash when you make an attack is phenomenal. Her attacks are great, her defense is great. Bodyguard is interesting, but it's less impactful because she's a secondary, and so like Anakin can just kill her. But like there's maybe some interesting applications of protecting a primary there, but I think it's kind of limited. Anakin's pretty happy to kill secondaries first. So I think she is C tier. I probably would rate her above the like Crosshair, Phil, Nadar group, but just barely, maybe at the top of that group. I think she's a Padme buff away or a box release away from being a real contender, but I think it's just her keywords are in the wrong place. Sam, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think she is kind of exactly where separatists are, where the good separatists are. I think her and Kraken actually are really super interesting comparable. Like really strong kits keyed off of keywords that are bad, right? And that's the thing. You can't just bring her in the rest of Galactic Republic because her tactic is so keyed to handmaidens, right? And that tactic is a big part of her kit. So sticking her by Kalani or these other droids, I think is a fine place to have her.
All right, Scott, tell us about Death Trooper Specialist.
Death Trooper Specialist. So the Death Trooper Specialist is an interesting figure who really he's kind of forced to pair with Krennic just because there's not a ton of wiggle room for 5 costs in the secondary in Empire. He on paper seems really good, but he just doesn't have enough oomph to kind of get there. The thing that makes like Death Trooper Escort is just better at one fewer point. So there's not really a lot of competition there. One of the things about the Death Trooper Specialist is that, well, the Death Trooper Escort is really there to, move people around and give out execution and be flexible. The Death Trooper Specialist is supposed to be like really offensive and be murdering things. And he's got protection. He's got immunity for expose. He can spend a force to move someone up and expose something. So he can move other people, though he's often using it on himself because he can kind of dash in, expose his opponent, and then make an attack. He also can give out conditions with kind of a free dash, and then these within 3 can give out conditions. And he does have access to a second attack, although it oftentimes is not super worth it. Decently fine attack, but the problem is that he will max out at 7 damage, and I think that's partly because they're like, well, we want to give him multiple attacks. He'll be, what's the word? Exposing his opponent. But it is often the case that at 5 costs as a secondary, he needs to do more. If he was 4 costs, I think he'd be really great. But at 5 costs, I think he is better than the Mandos, but I think he is in a similar space as Sabine and Lobot in B tier.
Yeah, he's a super interesting figure because I thought he was going to be better than he is, but seeing him across the couple times I've seen him, and even just feeling at what he does, there is just a little bit of a miss there. And again, if you removed all information outside of the cards, you would take the Death Trooper Escort over him every single time, I think. And that's just, you can't do that. 5 cost supports need to elevate in a way that is meaningful. And again, we have him in B tier, so it's not like we're saying he's bad. It's just that he's just missing a little bit.
Yeah, if he could attack the same unit with his unrelenting assault, because it has to be a different unit. And so that's kind of the big problem, is that if he did a ton of damage and he had to attack different units, okay, cool, that's fair. Or if he doesn't do a ton of damage, but he gets to attack them once with 5 and then once with 7, okay, that's also fair. But because it's, neither, it really limits him. And I think part of it is like, oh, Stormtrooper Sergeant's giving him 3 extra dice, and that can be really powerful. But again, with Escort has access to Sharpshooter 1 and a focus and with a dash. So he's going to be shooting 9 dice and doing the same amount of damage as the guy who costs 1 more and is supposed to be the murder bot. So he also only has 8 health, and Escort has 9.
Yeah, I I struggle to see him above Vader 3 because except for devoted stormtrooper lists, I don't see an Empire list where I really want him over Vader 3. I feel like Vader 3 is more impactful. Maybe I'm wrong because I don't play a ton of Empire. I'm pretty light on my Empire
So
reps.
I know where I put Specialist. I don't know where I put Vader 3. That's the only distinction for me, is that I put Specialist under Krennic in an Oops All Death Troopers V2 Krennic scenario. That's the list. And I think that's the best Imperial list, or one of, like, top three. I'm probably wrong now that we've seen some more stuff kind of Gen Con, but I think that list has legs. I don't know where V3 fits.
That's fair.
All right. The only quibble I potentially have with this is that we've got Death Trooper Special splitting up the Mandos again, but I think that's probably fine. But yeah, I think below Lobot, above Sabine makes sense. Great. Our last secondary, JK, tell us about the C3.
We save the best for last. C3PO. When we talk about glow ups, this is the predominant glow up of the buff. He went from the worst figure ever in the game. I don't think that's much of a thing. He was significantly the worst figure in the game. To, I believe that you guys are going to pull me down. I think he's an A tier figure. I'll give you my reasons. 1, he costs 3. He can turn 2 points with his free move ability, where he gets to move himself and another person. And the thing that honestly I think gets slept on is his condition healing ability, where anyone within 4 gets to heal a condition at the start of activation, is so good. On top of the fact that you can't kill him. I mean, you can kill him, but you can't shoot him. And so he kind of just sits back on a back point. And it turns out steadfast for your entire team is really good. And there's a reason why Ewok lists are playing this and Ewok lists are starting to win. And it's not because they buffed anything else. It's this right here. And the drop from 4 cost to 3 was gigantic for Leia, because I think Leia is slept on as well. But I think C3PO is just really that good. Even if he goes once and just sits there, from that point on, his just sitting there does consistently lifts your team up. Sam, help me out and help prove my point.
Yeah, so I think that the 3PO just does everything you want for a 3 cost. I look at 3 costs, and I think he's just the best one in the game as far as secondaries go. I think he's more impactful than Sergeant or Luke, or where else are we looking at? Pawns, Boss. What he does is just so unique and so powerful in his one list. And as you said, JK, he's the reason why Ewoks are good now. Because we talk about Mace's identity of just Mace needs to be engaged to give this buff, and mostly it's for the steadfast, and 3PO just kind of does that for free. It's incredible.
Yeah, no, I was expecting 3PO to end up in bottom of A tier as part of this conversation too. So like, I'm with you. My only complaint with 3PO is that he is stapled to Leia. I think if the other Ewok units were better, I think that like Chirpa suddenly becomes a factor. If the Ewok supports were good, because you can just run 3PO under there. I think that there are some potentially really interesting things you can do. JK, you've played around with like Freedom Fighter Leia plus Cassian to solid effect. I think it's real there. I do think that the addition of Pathfinders is also a nice boon for that particular list, because it gives you a second 4 cost support option if you want to go Commandos plus Pathfinders. Although I think you can run Zeb in that spot. You have some options there, but
yeah.
I
think just in general, yeah, going to 3. But yeah, for instance, K2 having lockdown plus steadfast is just the most annoying thing in the world, and you just kind of get it for free. He and again, he went from legitimately I didn't know where his card was to I think Ewoks took 3rd or 4th in Gen Con or whatever it was. So yeah. Okay. Anyway, I'm glad everyone agrees with me.
Perfect.
As they should.
Let's do one last surprise thing here. But for each one of us, I want you to say, hey, pick one unit that you would think is in the wrong spot, and if you would adjust it now that we have the full list in here. But go for it, Scott.
I would put Pawns 2 slots down.
Into C tier?
Top of C tier.
Okay. That's really funny, because mine is I would put Pawns closer to the middle of B tier as opposed to the bottom of it. But that is, I think we've covered that territory already.
You and I are Rey and Kylo both trying to get the lightsaber that is Pawns.
Exactly.
Looking at this, I think I would move. I think it might be Obi-2. I think he's a bit slept on. I think he should probably be a bit higher.
Interesting. Where do you want him?
I would probably move him above the. It's a lot of steps, but I think I would move him above the Mando package. But I kind of think the Mando's as a single step.
Yeah, I can see that. I agree with that.
My biggest thing that makes me not hate that is just that I'm like, I'd probably have an easier time running OB2 than Vader 3. So
Yep.
I think it makes sense for him to be above him.
JK, any wiggles you want to make here?
My one is I think that Sabe is better than where she is slotted. I understand all of the issues, but I don't think running handmaidens by themselves are such a tax. Padme is, but I think that there is a discussion of running Sabe handmaid is at least a discussion of being playable compared to everything else. But that being said, it's one of those situations where it's still like the sixth best faction in Galactic Republic, and so is it enough of a quibble for me to really care?
All right, that makes sense. I could see that, and I think we'll talk about handmaidens more in our support episode because I think there's some interesting stuff there. But yeah. So just to run over the full list in case you're an audio-only listener, starting from the top down, we have the lone member of S tier in Shaak Ti. A tier is Ezra, Rex, Death Trooper Escort, Callus, Reva/Third Sister, IG-88, Gideon Hask, and then 3PO. B tier is by far our largest, which is what it should be. Padawan Ahsoka, K2SO, Wrecker, Dengar, Boba Fett, Stormtrooper Sergeant, Luke Skywalker, Lobot, Death Trooper Specialist, Obi-2, Sabine, Bo-Katan, Gar Saxon, Paz, Vader 3, Chewie, Wicket, Pons, Wolf. C tier is Bosk, Boosh, Django, Barris, Kraken, Cody, Ara, Kalani, Sabe, Crosshair, Phil, Nadar, and Savage. And then D tier is Guarm, Grief, Paplo, Firebrand, and Snow Trooper Lieutenant. Thank you all for joining us. If you've lasted this long listening to us yell at each other, you're the best. Enjoy it, and we should have supports coming out to you soon. But thank you, and jump in the Slack. Let us know what you think, where you think we got it wrong, where you think we got it right, and we're happy to quibble and disagree, and hope this prompts some conversation there as well. And see you. Bye.
Okay, bye.